The key turned in the lock with a sound Alara Hartley hadn't expected to hear, smooth, certain, like it had been waiting for her all along. She stood on the porch of a house she'd never seen before, in a town whose name she'd only learned 3 days ago, holding an inheritance from a man she'd spent 16 years hating. The November wind cut through the Oregon pines, carrying the smell of wood smoke and something else, something that felt uncomfortably like memory. 30 days, the lawyer had said. Live there for 30 consecutive days, or the property goes to the secondary beneficiary. Alara didn't care about the house, didn't care about the workshop out back, or the land it sat on. She cared about $800,000, enough to clear her debts, restart her career, maybe finally stop running from a past that had never stopped chasing her. The door swung open. Inside, dust motes danced in slanted afternoon light. The air smelled like sawdust and old coffee lived in, and strangely warm. On the wall beside the entrance hung a photograph, a young girl with dark braids, maybe 7 years old, sitting on a man's shoulders. Both were laughing. Alara's breath caught. She recognized the girl immediately, her sister Vivian, who'd vanished 10 years ago, presumed dead. Case closed. But she'd never seen this photo before, never seen her father smile like that. And pinned to the frame was a handwritten note, the ink still dark. Alara, Vivian is alive. Find her before they find you. Dad. The key suddenly felt very heavy in her hand. 3 days earlier, Boston had been cold in the way only October in New England could be wet gray. The kind of cold that settled into your bones and stayed there. Alara had been working late again, alone in her corner of the architecture firm's open-plan office, when her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail like she did with everything that wasn't work, wasn't necessary, wasn't part of the careful, controlled life she'd built for herself over the past decade. But something made her pick up. Miss Hartley. The voice on the other end was professionally neutral, female. This is Patricia Greenwald from Greenwald and Associates Attorneys at Law. I'm calling regarding the estate of Robert James Hartley. Alara's hand tightened around the phone. I'm sorry, she said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. Who? Your father, Miss Hartley. I'm very sorry for your loss. Mr. Hartley passed away 3 months ago. We've been trying to reach you, but the contact information we had was 3 months. Alara stood up her chair, scraping against the floor. Around her, the office was empty. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. Why are you calling me now? There was a pause, paper shuffling. The estate is somewhat complicated, Patricia said carefully. There are conditions attached to the inheritance. We needed time to verify certain legal requirements before contacting the beneficiaries. I'm not interested. Miss Hartley, I understand this must be difficult, but you don't understand anything. Alara's voice was sharp, now cutting. My father left when I was 12 years old. I haven't seen him or heard from him in 16 years. Whatever he left behind, I don't want it. The estate is valued at approximately $800,000. The number landed like a physical thing. Alara sat back down. Patricia continued, her voice still professionally calm. The property includes a house, a workshop, and 2 acres of land in Timber Falls, Oregon. But there's a condition. You must live in the residence for 30 consecutive days. If you choose not to, or if you leave before the 30 days are complete, the inheritance passes to a secondary beneficiary whose identity is currently sealed. Alara closed her eyes. $800,000. That was her student loans, her credit card debt, the lease on her overpriced studio apartment that she could barely afford. That was starting over. That was freedom. "What if I just sell it?" she asked. "You can't. Not until the 30 days are complete and the property is legally transferred to you. Those are the terms of the will." "That's insane." "Perhaps, but it's legal. I have the documents here if you'd like to review them." Alara looked around her office. At the desk where she'd spent 12-hour days for the past 5 years. At the drafting table covered in blueprints for someone else's dream house. At the empty coffee cups and the framed degree on the wall that had cost her $60,000 and bought her exactly nothing that felt like a life. "When would I need to start?" she heard herself ask. "As soon as possible. The estate has been in limbo for 3 months already. There are bills, property taxes. The longer this takes, the more complicated it becomes." "I have a job." "I'm sure you do. But Miss Hartley, this is $800,000. I think it's worth considering." Alara thought about her bank account, the overdraft notice she'd gotten last week, the promotion she'd been passed over for, again, the empty apartment waiting for her in the dark. "I'll think about it," she said. "I'll email you the documents tonight. But Miss Hartley, don't take too long. Time matters in situations like these." After she hung up, Alara sat in the dark office for a long time, staring at nothing. Robert Hartley, her father, dead for 3 months, and she hadn't even known. She tried to feel something, grief, anger, anything, but there was only a dull, familiar numbness, the same numbness that had settled over her the day he left. The same numbness that had carried her through her mother's death at 18, through Vivian's disappearance that same year, through every loss and abandonment that had taught her the same lesson over and over. Don't need anyone, don't trust anyone, don't let anyone close enough to leave. Her phone buzzed. An email from Patricia Greenwald. Subject line: Estate Documents. Robert J. Hartley. Alara opened it, scrolled through pages of legal language that might as well have been another language entirely, until she found the personal letter scanned and attached as a PDF. It was handwritten, the writing shaky but deliberate. "Alara," it began, just her name. "Nothing more. I know you have no reason to trust me. I know I don't deserve your time or your attention, but I'm asking anyway the way a desperate man asks, because I have nothing left to lose, and you have everything to gain. Come to Timber Falls. Live in the house for 30 days. That's all I'm asking. In exchange, everything I have is yours. But more than that, and I know you'll think I'm lying or crazy or cruel, Vivian is alive. I found her, Alara. Your sister is alive. I've seen her. But I'm too old, too sick, too late to bring her home. You're the only one who can do it now. I've left you everything you need. The house, the workshop, the journals. But you have to come here first. You have to see it. You have to understand what happened before you can find her. Please, Alara. I know I'm asking for more than I deserve, but this isn't for me. It's for Vivian. It's for you. Don't let my mistakes cost you the only family you have left. Dad. Alara read it 3 times, then a 4th. Vivian is alive. She wanted to throw the phone across the room, wanted to scream. This was exactly like him, wasn't it? Absent for 16 years, and now even in death he was manipulating her, dangling hope like bait. Vivienne had been gone for 10 years. The police had searched for 8 months before quietly closing the case. Presumed dead. Everyone said so. Everyone except the part of Alara that woke up sometimes in the middle of the night, convinced she'd heard her sister's voice calling her name. She looked at the email again, at the property value, at the impossible promise. Outside Boston hummed with evening traffic, people going home to families, to lives that made sense, to worlds where fathers didn't vanish and sisters didn't disappear, and grief didn't follow you around like a shadow you couldn't shake. Alara made her decision the way she made all her decisions, now quickly, coldly, without letting herself feel anything that might change her mind. She opened a new email to her boss, typed out her 2 weeks' notice, then deleted it and wrote a different version. Personal emergency, family matter, need to take a leave of absence starting immediately. She sent it before she could reconsider. Then she booked a flight to Portland, Oregon, leaving in 3 days. Not because she believed her father, not because she thought Vivian was really alive, but because $800,000 was enough to buy a lot of things, and maybe, just maybe, it was enough to buy some answers. The bus from Portland to Timber Falls took 3 hours, winding through mountains that grew denser and taller as the city fell away behind them. Alara sat by the window, watching Oregon unfold in shades of green and gray. Douglas firs climbed the hillsides. Mist hung in the valleys like smoke. There were only 4 other passengers on the bus. An elderly woman who slept the entire way, 2 teenagers sharing earbuds, a man in a hunting jacket who got off halfway through the journey, disappearing into a town that looked like it had 3 buildings and a gas station. No one spoke. The bus driver, a weathered man with gray stubble, had nodded when Alara boarded but said nothing. She was grateful for the silence. It matched the inside of her head. She'd spent the flight from Boston reading through the documents Patricia had sent, the will, the property deed. Page after page of legal terminology that all boiled down to the same thing. Robert Hartley had owned a house and workshop in Timber Falls, Oregon. He'd lived there alone for the past 15 years. And now, if Alara could stand to sleep under his roof for 30 nights, it would all be hers. There was no mention of Vivian in the legal documents. No explanation for the letter's impossible claim. Just the cold facts of property and death and inheritance. Alara had also searched for information about Timber Falls. Population 847 according to the last census. Former mining town. Most of the mines had closed in the 80s. Now it survived on logging tourism and apparently not much else. The kind of place people left, not the kind they moved to. She tried to imagine her father there, Robert Hartley, who she remembered as a big man with rough hands and sawdust always in his hair, who used to lift her onto his shoulders, who taught her how to hammer a nail straight, how to measure twice and cut once, how to sand with the grain instead of against it, who left one day when she was 12 and never came back. The bus slowed. Ahead, a wooden sign appeared through the trees, Timber Falls, population 847. Welcome. This is you, the driver said, the first words he'd spoken since Portland. Elara gathered her bag, a single duffel with clothes for a week, her laptop, and not much else, and stepped off into air that smelled like pine and wood smoke and rain. The bus pulled away with a hydraulic hiss, leaving her alone on a street that looked like it belonged in a postcard from 1975. Main Street ran for maybe 6 blocks. Buildings with faded paint and hand-lettered signs, a general store, a diner with neon in the window that said open but looked closed, a post office the size of a garden shed, everything neat, everything quiet, everything empty. It was 2 in the afternoon, but Timber Falls felt like a town that had already called it a day. Elara checked her phone. No signal. Of course. She'd printed out directions before leaving Boston. The house was on Hartley Road. Apparently her father had lived there long enough to have a street named after him, or maybe he'd named it himself about a mile east of town center. She started walking. The pavement gave way to gravel after the first block. Houses appeared sporadically set back from the road, half hidden by trees. Some looked maintained. Others looked like they were quietly being reclaimed by the forest. She passed a yard full of rusted cars, a house with laundry on the line, a property that was just a chimney and a foundation, the rest long gone. The further she walked, the quieter everything became. No traffic, no voices, just the sound of her footsteps on gravel and the wind moving through the pines. She'd grown up in Boston. Noise was normal. Silence was suspicious. This silence felt like it had weight. After 20 minutes, the road curved and the trees opened up. There, set back about 50 yards from the road, was a house, 2 stories, white siding that had faded to gray, a wide front porch with a rocking chair, shutters that might have been green once, a stone chimney, and behind it, half visible through the pines, a large wooden structure that had to be the workshop. Elara stopped walking. This was it. This was where he'd been all those years. While she was growing up in Boston, changing schools, watching her mother work herself to exhaustion, wondering every single day why he never called, never wrote, never came back. He was here. She felt a flash of anger, hot and sudden. Then it faded the way all her feelings did lately, back into that familiar numbness. She walked up the gravel drive. The porch steps creaked under her weight. Someone had swept recently. There were no leaves, no debris. The windows were clean. She pulled out the key Patricia had mailed to her, heavy old-fashioned brass. It slid into the lock smoothly, turned without resistance, and the door opened. The first thing Elara noticed was the smell. Not must or decay like she'd expected. but sawdust and coffee and something else. Linseed oil, maybe. The smell of work of hands that stayed busy. The second thing she noticed was the light. It poured in through windows on 3 sides of the main room, turning the dust in the air into something almost beautiful. The third thing was the photograph. It hung on the wall just inside the door in a simple wooden frame. Vivian, maybe 7 years old, dark braids flying, sitting on their father's shoulders, both of them laughing. Behind them, blurred but recognizable, was this house, this porch. Alara had never seen this picture before. She stepped closer, her bag slipping from her shoulder to the floor. When had this been taken? Vivian was 7, which meant Alara would have been 10. But Alara didn't remember ever being here. Didn't remember Vivian ever meeting their father after he left. Unless he hadn't left. Unless he'd been taken. The thought arrived uninvited. Alara pushed it away. That's when she saw the note pinned to the frame. A piece of paper folded once, her name written on the outside in handwriting she didn't recognize but somehow knew anyway. She unpinned it with fingers that didn't quite feel steady. Alara Vivian is alive. Find her before they find you, Dad. The words didn't make sense. Find her before they find you. Who was they? Find her where Alara read the note 3 more times, as if repetition would make it clearer. It didn't. She looked at the photograph again. Vivian's face frozen mid-laugh. 7 years old. Happy. 10 years ago, Vivian had been 15 when she disappeared. It had been the worst year of Alara's life. Their mother had died in February, a car accident, sudden and brutal and wrong. Alara had been 18, drowning in grief and funeral arrangements, and the impossible task of becoming an adult overnight. Vivian had tried to be strong, had tried to help, but she'd been 15 and devastated and angry at a world that had taken her mother. In June, 4 months after the funeral, Vivian didn't come home from school. The police searched, put out alerts, questioned everyone, but there were no witnesses, no leads, no trace. Vivian had simply vanished somewhere between the bus stop and their apartment. After 8 months, the detective assigned to the case had sat Alara down and used words like statistically unlikely and presumed deceased and will keep the case open, but Alara had nodded, had signed the papers, had stopped hoping because hope was just another word for prolonged suffering. Now she stood in her dead father's house, holding a note that said her sister was alive. She wanted to crumple it up, wanted to walk back to town, find a phone call Patricia Greenwald, and tell her to give the house to whoever the hell the secondary beneficiary was. Instead, she folded the note carefully and put it in her pocket. Then she started exploring. The main floor was open plan. Living room, kitchen, dining area all flowing together. Furniture that was simple but well made. A couch that looked hand-built. A dining table with 6 chairs, the wood worn smooth. Bookshelves packed with volumes on carpentry, architecture, local history. Everything was clean. Dust, yes, but not dirt. Like someone had been taking care of the place even after Robert died. In the kitchen, she found dishes in the drying rack, a coffee maker with grounds still in the filter. A calendar on the wall stopped at July. 3 months ago. There were marks on the calendar, appointments maybe. M, 2 p.m. on Tuesdays. Check in with IW on Thursdays. The handwriting was shaky, like it had been written by someone whose hands didn't quite work right anymore. Alara opened the refrigerator, empty and unplugged, but clean. Someone had cleared it out after he died. She climbed the stairs. 3 bedrooms. The first was clearly Robert's. A bed neatly made, a dresser with a hairbrush, a watch-reading glasses, a book on the nightstand, a mystery bookmark still in place at page 147. The second bedroom was empty except for a desk and more bookshelves. The third made her stop in the doorway. It was decorated for a child. A bed with a patchwork quilt, a bookshelf with picture books and young adult novels, a desk with colored pencils and sketch paper, and on the walls paintings, watercolors of forests and mountains and rivers. Alara recognized the style immediately. Vivian had loved to paint. She walked to the desk, picked up one of the sketchbooks, opened it. The first page had a date written in the corner, June 14th, 10 years ago, 2 weeks before Vivian disappeared. Alara flipped through the pages slowly. Sketches of birds, trees, the view from a window that showed pine trees and mountains, and people. Rough portraits of a man with kind eyes and work-worn hands. Their father. Vivian had been here, had stayed here, had drawn these pictures in this room, which meant Robert hadn't abandoned them. Or he had, and then Vivian had found him somehow, had come here, had spent time with him, and Alara had never known. She sat down on the bed, the sketchbook still in her hands. Why hadn't Vivian told her? Why the secret? Unless it hadn't been a secret. Unless Alara had been so buried in her own grief after their mother died that she hadn't noticed, hadn't paid attention, hadn't seen that her 15-year-old sister was disappearing every weekend to visit a father Alara had written off as dead to them. The guilt arrived sharp and sudden. She set the sketchbook down carefully and left the room, closing the door behind her. Downstairs she needed air. She walked through the kitchen and out the back door onto a small deck that overlooked the property. And there, 50 yards away through a stand of pines, was the workshop. It was bigger than the house. 2 stories barn style with large windows and a roll-up door on one side. The wood was weathered but solid. Smoke wasn't coming from the chimney, but somehow the building still looked alive. Alara walked toward it. The path was well-worn packed earth with stepping stones every few feet. Someone had used this path daily for years. The workshop door was unlocked. It opened with a soft creak. The interior took her breath away. Light poured in through the windows, illuminating a space that was part factory, part art studio, part cathedral. Workbenches ran along 2 walls covered with tools organized with obsessive precision. Hand saws hung from pegboards, chisels arranged by size, planes oiled and ready. Along the far wall, lumber was stacked and sorted by type and dimension. Oak, maple, walnut, cherry. And everywhere furniture. Not just furniture, art. A rocking chair with spindles so delicate they looked like they'd been carved from light. A dining table with inlaid geometric patterns. A cradle with hand-carved birds along the rim, a bookshelf that spiraled like a tree growing toward the ceiling. None of it was finished. All of it was extraordinary. Elara walked slowly through the space, running her fingers along the wood. The craftsmanship was beyond anything she'd seen, even in the high-end design magazines she studied for work. This wasn't just skill. This was devotion. She found the cradle tucked in a corner, half covered by a drop cloth. When she pulled the cloth back, she saw the carving along the rim more clearly. Not just birds, specific birds. A robin, a blue jay, a chickadee, and carved into the headboard, almost hidden in the design, "For Vivian, my lost star." Alara's throat tightened. Lost star. That's what their mother used to call Vivian when she was little, because she'd been born during a meteor shower, and Jennifer had joked that one of the stars had come down to Earth just for them. How did Robert know that he'd left when Vivian was 9, before the nickname stuck? Unless Jennifer had told him, unless they'd stayed in contact, unless everything Alara thought she knew about her parents' separation was wrong. She sat down on the floor next to the cradle, her back against the workbench, and tried to organize her thoughts into something that made sense. Her father had lived here for at least 15 years, had built a workshop, had created beautiful things, had kept a bedroom ready for Vivian, had somehow stayed in touch with at least one of his daughters, even if Alara hadn't known about it. And now he was dead, and the house was hers, and there was a note saying Vivian was alive. None of it added up. She needed information, needed to understand what had happened in the 16 years between Robert leaving Boston and dying in this house. Her eyes fell on a filing cabinet in the corner, heavy steel 4 drawers locked. No, not locked. The key was in the lock turned halfway. Alara stood and walked over, turned the key the rest of the way, pulled open the top drawer. Files, dozens of them, labeled by year. She pulled out the one marked with the current year. Inside were receipts, tax documents, bank statements, nothing interesting. She tried the year before, more of the same. Then she opened the second drawer, files labeled differently here, not by year but by name, and there third from the front, Elara. Her hand shook slightly as she pulled it out. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to her old address in Boston, all stamped "Return to Sender." She opened the first one, dated 16 years ago, just a few months after Robert had left. "Dear Alara," it began. "I know you're angry with me. I know you don't understand why I had to leave. Someday I'll be able to explain, and I hope you'll forgive me. Until then, please know that I think about you every day. I love you. I've always loved you. Nothing will ever change that, Dad." The next letter was from 3 months later, then 6 months. Then they came monthly like clockwork. Birthday letters, Christmas letters, letters about her starting high school, about her mother's death, about Vivian. All returned, all undelivered. But not because Robert hadn't tried. Alara read through them with a growing sense of unreality. This didn't match the story she'd told herself for 16 years. The story where Robert was a coward who abandoned his family and never looked back. This was a man who had written to his daughter every month for 16 years, even though every single letter came back. Why hadn't she received them? Had her mother intercepted them? She put the letters back and checked the filing cabinet again. Found another folder. This one labeled Jennifer. Inside was legal correspondence. Restraining order documents. A court order prohibiting Robert from contacting Jennifer or coming within 500 feet of the family home, dated 3 weeks after he'd left. A restraining order. Her mother had gotten a restraining order. Why Alara kept reading. Found a police report. An arrest record. Robert Hartley arrested for fraud, released on bail, trial pending. The trial date was crossed out. A note in the margin said, "Charges dismissed, lack of evidence." But by then the restraining order was in place. Jennifer had filed for divorce, and Robert had moved to Oregon. Alara sat down hard on the workshop floor, papers scattered around her. He hadn't left them. He'd been driven away. Someone had accused him of fraud. He'd been arrested. And Jennifer, believing the charges, or scared, or just done, had cut him off completely. The restraining order meant he couldn't come home, couldn't see his daughters, couldn't even send them letters directly. So he'd tried anyway. For 16 years he'd tried. Alara didn't realize she was crying until a tear hit one of the letters, blurring the ink. She wiped her face roughly. This wasn't the time to fall apart. She needed to understand everything before she let herself feel anything. She stood and kept searching the workshop. Found a desk in the corner with a lamp and more papers. Blueprints for furniture, sketches, design ideas, and journals. 5 of them leather-bound, stacked neatly. She opened the most recent one. The entries were dated starting from 15 years ago and running up until 3 months ago, right before Robert died. The handwriting in the early entries was neat and controlled. By the end, it was shaky, harder to read. She flipped to the last entry, dated July 18th, 3 months and 1 week ago. "I'm out of time. The doctor says weeks, maybe a month if I'm lucky. I'm not scared of dying. I'm scared of leaving Alara and Vivian alone without them knowing the truth. I found Vivian. After 10 years of searching, I finally found her. She's in Portland in a facility. I've seen her with my own eyes, but she didn't recognize me. The doctors say trauma, say memory loss. They say she needs time, but I don't have time. I've set everything up for Alara, the house, the workshop, the 30-day requirement to force her to come here to see this place, to find the clues I've left. She won't believe me if I just tell her. She needs to discover it herself. Vivian is alive, and the people who took her, who hurt her, are still out there. Alara has to find her sister, has to bring her home, has to finish what I couldn't. I'm sorry I failed them both. Sorry I wasn't stronger. Sorry I let fear keep me away when I should have fought harder. But maybe this inheritance, this house, this workshop full of unfinished things, maybe it's enough to bring them back together. Maybe broken families can be mended after all. R.H. Alara read the entry 3 times, then a 4th. Vivian was alive, in Portland, in a facility. Her father had seen her, had found her after 10 years of searching, and then he'd died before he could bring her home. Alara's hands were shaking now, not with grief, with something sharper, anger maybe, or hope, or the terrible combination of both. She grabbed the journal and 3 others, tucked them under her arm, and walked back to the house. It was getting dark. The pines cast long shadows across the property. Inside, she turned on lights, found the thermostat, got the heat running. Then she sat at the kitchen table and started reading from the beginning. The journals told a story Alara had never known. A story that started 16 years ago, when Robert Hartley was a carpenter in Boston with a wife and 2 daughters and a business partner named Martin Whitfield. Martin and Robert had gone into business together renovating historic homes. Martin handled the business side. Robert did the craftsmanship. For 5 years it worked. They made good money, built a reputation, had more work than they could handle. Then Martin proposed a bigger project, a historic mansion in Cambridge that needed a complete restoration. Budget $800,000. Robert's share of the profit $200,000. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. Martin said he'd secured the funding. All Robert had to do was sign the partnership paperwork and they could start. Robert signed. He trusted Martin. 3 weeks later, the police showed up at Robert's house, arrested him for fraud. The funding Martin had secured was from investors who'd been promised returns on a project that didn't exist. The renovation contracts were fake. The budget was a lie. And all the paperwork had Robert's signature. Martin claimed he'd been fooled too, claimed Robert had forged his signature on the fraudulent documents, claimed Robert had orchestrated the entire scheme. Robert was the one who went to jail. Martin walked away. Jennifer believed Martin, or she believed the evidence which all pointed to Robert. Either way, she filed for a restraining order, filed for divorce, and cut him out of their lives completely. Robert spent 18 months in jail before the charges were dismissed. A forensic accountant finally proved that Martin had manufactured the evidence that Robert had been set up. But by then the damage was done. Jennifer wouldn't take him back, wouldn't let him see the girls. The restraining order stayed in place. So Robert moved to Oregon, to Timber Falls, where he'd grown up, where his parents had left him a piece of land. He built the house, built the workshop, and spent the next 16 years trying to rebuild his life while searching for a way back to his daughters. The early journal entries were full of grief and guilt. Plans to hire lawyers to challenge the restraining order to prove his innocence to Jennifer. But Jennifer died in a car accident when Alara was 18. After that, Robert's focus shifted entirely to his daughters. He hired private investigators to check on them, learned that Alara was in college studying architecture, that Vivian was struggling in high school, acting out, getting into trouble. He wrote to them both. All the letters came back. Then 10 years ago, everything changed. Vivian showed up in Timber Falls. Robert's journal entry from that day was 3 pages long, the handwriting shaky with emotion. She found me. I don't know how, but Vivian found me. She's 15 and she's angry and she's beautiful and she's here. She says she found old letters in Jennifer's things after the funeral. Letters I'd written to Jennifer in the early years before the restraining order, when I was still trying to explain. Letters Jennifer had hidden. Vivian read them, realized I'd been telling the truth, realized I hadn't abandoned them. She took a bus across the country to meet me. I don't deserve this, don't deserve her forgiveness or her presence. But I'm grateful beyond words. She's staying for the summer. We're getting to know each other. She paints in the afternoons while I work in the shop. We eat dinner together, we talk. It's the best summer of my life. Elara read through those summer entries with a growing ache in her chest. Vivian had been here, had spent 3 months with their father, had been happy, and Elara, buried in her own grief after their mother's death, hadn't noticed her sister leaving every weekend, hadn't asked where she was going, hadn't paid attention. She'd been a terrible sister. The summer entries ended in late August. Vivian went back to Boston today. School starts next week. She promised to visit again at Christmas. I'm already counting the days. But Vivian never made it to Christmas. The next entry was from mid-September, and the handwriting was jagged, panicked. I got a call from a detective in Boston. Vivian is missing. She didn't come home from school yesterday. No one's seen her. They're searching, but there are no leads. I called Elara, but she won't talk to me. Told me I had no right to contact her, that I'd given up that right years ago. She doesn't know Vivian, and I had reconnected. Doesn't know we spent the summer together. And I can't tell her, because if I do, the police will want to know why I didn't report that earlier. Will think I had something to do with Vivian's disappearance. I'm trapped, again. All I can do is search on my own, hire investigators, follow every lead. I will find her. I have to. For the next 10 years, the journals documented Robert's search. Private investigators hired and fired, leads that went nowhere, tips that turned out to be false. Years of searching, spending every dollar he had, following every possible trail. Until a year ago, when one of the investigators finally found something. A Jane Doe admitted to a psychiatric facility in Portland. Female, mid-20s, no identification, no memory of her name or past. Found wandering the streets 3 years ago. The investigator sent Robert a photograph, low quality, taken through a window. Robert knew immediately it was Vivian. He drove to Portland, went to the facility, saw her through the glass in the common room, but by then he was already sick. Stage 4 cancer. The doctors had given him a year, maybe less. He tried to get Vivian released into his care, but without proof of their relationship, without Vivian able to confirm who she was, the facility refused. He needed time. Time to get legal documentation to prove paternity, to navigate the system. But time was the one thing he didn't have. The final entries in the journal were heartbreaking. Robert dying slowly, watching his daughter through glass, unable to reach her. "I'm not going to make it," he wrote a month before he died. But Elara can. Elara is strong, smarter than I ever was. If I can just get her here, get her to see the truth, she'll find Vivian. She'll bring her home. I'm leaving everything to her, the house, the workshop, but with conditions, because I know Elara. She'll want to take the money and run. She won't want to face the past. The 30-day requirement will force her to stay, to look around, to find these journals. And when she does, she'll understand. She'll find her sister. I have to believe that. It's the only thing keeping me going. The last entry was the one Elara had already read, the one about running out of time. She closed the journal and sat in the dark kitchen listening to the house settle around her. Robert hadn't abandoned them. He'd been framed, driven away legally, barred from contact. He'd spent 16 years trying to come back. 16 years searching for Vivian after she disappeared. And he'd died alone, his last hope pinned on a daughter who'd hated him. Elara put her head in her hands. She'd been so wrong about everything. And now Vivian was somewhere in Portland in a facility with no memory and no family and no one looking for her. Except Elara. She stood up, walked to the window. Outside the workshop was a dark shape against the darker trees. She'd come here for money, for $800,000 to pay off debts and start over. But that's not what this was about anymore. This was about a sister she'd failed 10 years ago. A sister who was alive and lost and waiting. Elara pulled out her phone. Still no signal. She'd have to go into town tomorrow, find a phone, call the facility in Portland. But tonight she needed to finish reading, needed to understand everything. She made coffee in her father's kitchen, using his coffee maker, his mugs. Sat back down at the table, opened the next journal, and kept reading. Elara woke at dawn with her cheek pressed against the journal page's cold coffee in a mug beside her, and light bleeding through the kitchen windows. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then it came back in a rush. Oregon, Timber Falls, her father's house, Vivian. She sat up, her neck stiff, her eyes gritty. She'd read until 3 a.m, working through all 5 journals chronologically. Now she understood the full scope of what Robert had been trying to do. He'd documented everything: the fraud case, Martin Whitfield's betrayal, the investigators he'd hired to find Vivian, names, dates, places. It was all there, including the name of the facility in Portland where Vivian was being held. Bridgewater Psychiatric Care Center. Elara needed to get there, needed to see for herself. But first, she needed to make a phone call. She grabbed her coat and walked into town. The morning air was cold and sharp mist still clinging to the pines. Timber Falls looked different in daylight, less abandoned, more just quiet. A few trucks were parked outside the diner. Smoke rose from chimneys. She found a payphone outside the general store. Actually found one. It felt like stepping back in time. She dialed the number for Bridgewater Psychiatric Care Center. Bridgewater, how may I direct your call? A woman's voice, professional and distant. I'm looking for information about a patient, Elara said. A Jane Doe who was admitted about 3 years ago. I'm sorry, but we can't give out patient information over the phone. Are you family? Yes, I'm her sister. Then you'll need to come in person with identification and proof of relation. We take patient privacy very seriously. I understand. Can you at least confirm she's still there? A pause. I really can't. Please. Elara's voice cracked. "I've been looking for her for 10 years. I just need to know if she's there." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "What's your sister's name?" "Vivian Hartley. She would have been admitted as a Jane Doe, but that's her real name, Vivian Hartley." The sound of typing. Then, "Hold, please." Elara waited, her heart pounding. The woman came back on the line. "We do have a patient matching that description, but I can't confirm identity or give any details over the phone. You'll need to come to the facility during visiting hours with proper documentation." "When are visiting hours?" "Wednesday through Sunday, 2 to 4 p.m. Today was Thursday." Elara checked her watch. 9 a.m. "I'll be there this afternoon," she said. "The facility is in Portland. That's a 3-hour drive from where are you calling from?" "Timber Falls." "That's nearly 4 hours. You won't make it by 2. "Then I'll be there tomorrow." Elara hung up before the woman could say anything else. She stood there for a moment, hand still on the payphone, breathing hard. Vivian was alive, was real, was less than 4 hours away. 10 years. 10 years of thinking her sister was dead, and she'd been in Portland the whole time. Elara walked back toward the house, her mind racing. She'd need to gather documentation, birth certificates, some kind of proof they were sisters. She'd need to rent a car, drive to Portland tomorrow. She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't notice the woman standing on her father's porch. Elara stopped walking. The woman was older, maybe late 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a braid, and a weathered face that suggested a life spent outdoors. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt, and held a casserole dish in her hands. "You must be Elara," the woman said. It wasn't a question. Elara approached slowly. "Who are you?" "Margot Brennan. I own the coffee shop in town. I was a friend of your father's." She held out the casserole dish. "I thought you might need a proper meal. Moving into a new place is always hard." Elara took the dish automatically. It was still warm. "Thank you," she said, because she didn't know what else to say. Margot studied her with sharp blue eyes. "You look like him. Robert, same stubborn chin." Elara didn't know how to respond to that either. "How long are you planning to stay?" Margot asked. 30 days. That's the requirement. And then I sell the place and go back to Boston." Margot nodded slowly. "That's what I thought you'd say. That's what Robert thought too." "You knew about the will." "I knew everything. Robert and I were close. He told me about the conditions, about why he was making you stay. He hoped you'd find the journals, hoped you'd understand." Elara felt something tighten in her chest. "He should have just told me, should have called, emailed something, instead of this treasure hunt. He tried. You wouldn't have listened. The words stung because they were true." Margot gestured to the porch. "Can we sit for a minute? There are things you need to know before you go to Portland." Elara's eyes narrowed. "How did you know I was going to Portland?" "Because that's where Vivian is. And if you read the journals, which I'm guessing you did based on the dark circles under your eyes, then you know Robert found her. You're your father's daughter. Of course you're going." They sat in the rocking chairs on the porch. Margot didn't speak right away, just looked out at the trees at the workshop visible through the pines. Finally she said, "Your father was a good man. I know you don't believe that. I know what you think of him. But he was good, Elara. And what happened to him, what Martin Whitfield did, it destroyed more than just his reputation. The journals said Martin framed him. Martin did more than that. He orchestrated the whole thing. The fake investment, the fraudulent contracts, all of it. And when Robert figured it out, when he tried to blow the whistle, Martin made sure Robert went down instead." "Why? What did Martin have to gain?" Margot's expression darkened. "Your father owned land. This land. 2 acres right in the center of what's now the most valuable property in Timber Falls. Martin wanted it, offered to buy it multiple times. Robert always said no, so Martin found another way." Elara felt cold. He framed Robert to get his land. He framed Robert to ruin him, to make sure Robert lost everything, his business, his family, his reputation. When Robert went to prison, he couldn't pay his bills. The land went into foreclosure. Martin bought it for pennies on the dollar. But Robert's here now, on this land, because I bought it back. Margot's voice was quiet. Used my savings, bought it at auction and held it in trust until Robert got out of prison. Then I signed it back over to him. Elara stared at her. "Why would you do that?" "Because someone needed to believe him. Someone needed to stand by him when everyone else walked away." Margot met her eyes. "I loved your father, Elara. Not the way you're thinking. But I loved him, and I couldn't let Martin win." The morning air felt heavier suddenly. "What happened to Martin?" Elara asked. "He died 5 years ago. Fell down the stairs at his house. Ruled an accident." "Was it?" Margot didn't answer right away. Then his son Callum inherited everything. The business, the properties, the money. All of it built on what Martin stole from your father and a dozen other men he ruined. And Callum, still here, still running the family business, still buying up every piece of land he can get his hands on. Margot paused. "Including this property, he's made offers, through lawyers, through intermediaries. He wants this land, Elara, wants it badly. Why, it's 2 acres in the middle of nowhere. It's 2 acres in the middle of a development deal worth $30 million. Callum's been quietly buying up the whole valley. Some big Portland developer wants to build a resort. Timber Falls is about to become a destination. And this property, your property now, is right in the center of the planned site." Alara's mind raced. "So if you sell to Callum, he makes millions. If you don't, the whole development falls apart. Then I won't sell." Margot smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's what your father said. And 3 months later, he was dead." The implication hung in the air. "You think Callum killed him?" "I think your father was sick. Cancer doesn't need help killing someone. But I also think the stress of fighting off Callum's lawyers, of trying to protect this place while searching for Vivian, I think it wore him down faster than it should have." Margot stood. "You asked what you need to know before going to Portland. Here it is, be careful. Callum knows you're here, knows you inherited. He'll make you an offer, and it'll be generous. more money than you've ever seen. I'm not interested. Good. But he won't give up easily, and there are things he'll do, things he's done before to get what he wants. Like what? Margot looked at her for a long moment. Ask yourself this. Vivian disappeared 10 years ago, right after spending a summer here with Robert. She vanished in Boston, but she ended up in Portland. How does a 15-year-old girl get from Boston to Portland with no memory of how she got there? Elara's blood ran cold. You think Callum had something to do with Vivian? I think there are pieces to this story your father never figured out. Pieces he died trying to understand. Margot descended the porch steps. Just be careful, Elara, and don't trust anyone who makes things sound too easy. She walked away, leaving Elara alone with the casserole and a dozen new questions. Elara sat on the porch for a long time after Margot left, watching the morning light filter through the trees. The journals had given her some answers, but they'd opened up new mysteries too. If Margot was right, if Callum Whitfield had something to do with Vivian's disappearance, then going to Portland wasn't just about finding her sister. It was about finding out what had happened and who was responsible. Elara stood and went back inside. She had work to do, documentation to gather, a car to rent, a 4-hour drive to prepare for. But first she walked back to the workshop. There was something she needed to see again. The cradle sat where she'd left it, half covered by the drop cloth. She pulled the cloth away completely this time, studying the craftsmanship in full daylight. The birds carved along the rim were perfect, each feather detailed, each eye bright, and the words carved into the headboard, "For Vivian, my lost star." Robert had made this for a daughter he might never see again, had poured his grief and hope into every careful cut, every sanded edge. It was beautiful. It was heartbreaking. Elara ran her fingers along the wood, feeling the grain, the smoothness, the care. This was what her father had been, not the man who abandoned them, but the man who built beautiful things while waiting for his daughters to come home. She understood now why he'd left her this place. Not just the money, though, that was part of it, but the workshop, the journals, the evidence of a life spent trying to make amends for mistakes that weren't even his fault. He'd left her the truth, and the truth was this: their family had been broken by lies. But maybe, just maybe, it could be put back together with the truth. Elara covered the cradle again and walked back to the house. Tomorrow she'd drive to Portland. Tomorrow she'd find Vivian, and then they'd figure out the rest together. But tonight she had one more thing to do. She sat at the kitchen table, pulled out a piece of paper, and started writing. "Dear Dad," she began. The words came slowly at first, then faster. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I thought the worst. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. But I'm here now. And I'm going to find Vivian. I'm going to bring her home. I'm going to finish what you started. And maybe when it's all over, I'll understand what you tried to tell me all those years ago, that families don't break just because they bend. That love doesn't end just because it gets tested. I wish I'd known you, the real you. not the version I created in my anger, but I'm learning through your journals, through your work, through this house and this workshop and this small town where people still remember you as someone good. I'm learning who you really were, and I think I would have liked him. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we gave up on you. I'll make this right. I promise. Elara. She folded the letter carefully and walked outside to the workshop. There on the workbench, she found what she was looking for, a wooden box Robert had been carving, unfinished like everything else. She placed the letter inside and closed the lid. Someday she'd finish the box. Someday she'd complete the things her father had started. But first, she had to find her sister. Elara walked back to the house as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow everything would change. Tonight, for the first time in 16 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, broken things could be fixed after all. The drive to Portland took 4.5 hours through mountains that seemed to swallow the road whole. Elara had rented a car in town, a beat-up sedan from a mechanic who looked at her driver's license twice before handing over the keys, and left Timber Falls before dawn, the journals packed in her bag, along with every piece of documentation she could find. Birth certificates, old family photos, anything that might prove she and Vivian were sisters. The highway unwound through forests so dense they blocked out the early morning light. Occasionally the trees would part to reveal glimpses of the valley below, mist-covered and ancient. It was beautiful in a way that felt almost hostile, like the land itself was warning her to turn back. She didn't. By the time Portland's skyline emerged through the gray morning, Elara's hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. She'd barely slept, had spent the night reading through the journals again, looking for details she might have missed. Names, dates, anything that could help her understand what had happened to Vivian. She'd found one entry that kept replaying in her mind, written 8 months after Vivian disappeared. The investigator called today, said there was a reported sighting in Idaho, a girl matching Vivian's description at a bus station. But by the time they followed up, she was gone. The security footage was too grainy to be certain. Another dead end. Another night I won't sleep. I'm starting to think the not knowing is worse than any truth could be. Elara understood that feeling now. The not knowing had followed her for 10 years. But in a few hours, she'd walk into Bridgewater Psychiatric Care Center, and the not knowing would end. She just wasn't sure she was ready for what would replace it. The facility was in southeast Portland, tucked away on a quiet street lined with maple trees that had already lost their leaves. It was smaller than Elara had imagined, a 2-story brick building with clean windows and a well-maintained lawn. It looked more like a private school than a psychiatric hospital. She parked and sat in the car for a full minute, breathing. This was it. Vivian was inside. After 10 years of grief and guilt and unanswered questions, her sister was less than 100 feet away. Elara forced herself out of the car, walked to the entrance, pressed the buzzer. A voice crackled through the intercom. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see a patient, Jane Doe. I called yesterday." The door buzzed open. The interior was quiet and carefully neutral. Cream-colored walls, abstract art that was probably meant to be calming, a reception desk where a woman in her 50s looked up with a professional smile. "You must be Miss Hartley," the woman said. "I'm Carol. We spoke on the phone. Is she here? Can I see her?" "I'll need to see your identification first, and any documentation proving your relationship." Alara handed over her driver's license and the folder of papers she'd brought. Birth certificates showing both their names, both listing Jennifer Hartley as mother. Old family photos. A report card from Vivian's school with both sisters listed as emergency contacts. Carol examined everything carefully, too carefully, like she was looking for a reason to say no. Finally, she nodded. "Everything seems to be in order, but you should know the patient you're here to see has been with us for 3 years. In that time, no one has visited, no one has called asking about her, until you." "Our father tried," Alara said quietly. "He died 3 months ago." Carol's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss, but I need you to understand something before you see her. This patient has severe trauma-related amnesia. She doesn't remember her name, her past, or how she came to be here. Any attempts to force memories could be harmful. I just want to see her, and she may not want to see you. She may not recognize you. She may become distressed." "I understand." Carol stood. "Follow me." They walked down a hallway that smelled like lavender and something medicinal underneath, past doors marked with numbers instead of names. Somewhere a television murmured. Someone laughed, the sound oddly bright in the muted space. Carol stopped at a door marked with a small window. "She's in the common room. I'll introduce you, but after that I'll give you privacy. We'll be watching on the monitors. If she becomes upset, we'll intervene." Alara nodded, not trusting her voice. Carol opened the door. The common room was large and filled with natural light from tall windows. There were chairs, tables, bookshelves. A few patients scattered throughout, an elderly man doing a puzzle, a young woman staring out the window. And there in the corner by the window sat Vivian. Alara's breath stopped. She looked so different. Her dark hair, which had been long and wild at 15, was now cut short and neat. She was thin, too thin and pale. She wore simple clothes, jeans, and a gray sweater. Her hands were folded in her lap. She wasn't doing anything, just sitting, staring at nothing. "Vivian," Carol said gently, "you have a visitor." Vivian didn't react, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge them at all. Carol glanced at Alara. She does this sometimes, goes somewhere inside herself. Just approach slowly. Carol left the door closing softly behind her. Alara stood frozen for a moment. This was her sister. The girl who used to paint for hours, who laughed too loud, who snuck cookies before dinner and blamed it on the dog they didn't have. Now she sat like a ghost of herself. Alara crossed the room slowly, pulled a chair up beside Vivian, sat down, leaving space between them. "Viv," she said softly, "it's me. It's Alara." Nothing. No reaction. "I know you might not remember me. They said you might not. But I'm your sister, your big sister. I've been looking for you for a really long time. Vivian's eyes moved slightly, focused on something outside the window, a bird maybe, or just the gray Portland sky. Elara reached into her bag and pulled out one of the photographs she'd brought, the one from the frame in the house. Vivian on their father's shoulders, both of them laughing. She held it where Vivian could see it. "This is you," Elara said, "and this is our dad. He took care of you, loved you, spent 10 years looking for you after you disappeared." Vivian's eyes flickered to the photo, stayed there for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice rough from disuse. "Gone." It was barely a whisper, but Elara heard it clearly. "What's gone?" Elara asked gently. "Everything." Vivian's eyes remained on the photo. All of it. Gone. I know it feels that way. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Vivian turned to look at her then, really look at her. Her eyes still that same dark brown. Elara remembered, searched Elara's face like she was trying to find something she'd lost. "Do you remember me?" Elara asked, even though she knew the answer would hurt. Vivian's brow furrowed slightly. "Should I? We grew up together. You're my little sister. We shared a room until you were 12. You used to steal my clothes and I pretended to be mad, but I never really was." Nothing. No recognition. Elara felt something crack inside her chest. She pulled out another photo, this one older. Elara maybe 10, Vivian 7. Both of them in matching Halloween costumes, witches with crooked hats and gap-toothed grins. "This was Halloween," Elara said. "You made me go as a witch with you because you were scared to go alone. We got so much candy that night. You ate so much you threw up, and Mom said that's what happens when you don't listen." Vivian stared at the photo for a long time. Then quietly, "Purple." Elara's heart jumped. "What?" "The hat. Was it purple?" "Yes." Elara's voice shook. "Yes, your hat was purple. Mine was black." "I liked purple," Vivian said, like she was discovering something new about herself. "You loved purple. Your room at home was purple. Your backpack, your bike, everything." Vivian's eyes closed. Her hands clenched in her lap. "It hurts. Trying to remember. It hurts." "Then don't force it. I'm just so glad you're alive, Viv. I thought you were dead. For 10 years I thought I'd lost you." Vivian opened her eyes, looked at Elara with something that might have been curiosity. "Why? Why what? Why did you think I was dead?" "Because you disappeared. You were 15. You didn't come home from school one day, and we never found you. The police searched for months. They said..." Elara's voice caught. "They said you were probably gone, that girls who disappear like that don't usually come back." "But I did come back. What do you remember about how you got here?" Vivian's expression went distant again. "Nothing. I woke up here. They said someone left me at the emergency room. I didn't have anything. No wallet, no phone, no name." She paused. "I still don't have a name. Not one that feels real. Your name is Vivian Hartley. You're 25 years old. You were born in Boston. Your favorite color is purple. You love to paint, and you were the bravest person I knew. Vivian absorbed this quietly. Then, were. The question hit like a physical blow. Elara corrected. You are the bravest person I know, because you survived. Whatever happened to you, you survived it. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, rain started to fall soft and steady against the windows. Finally, Vivian said, "There's a man in my dreams. I think he's important, but I don't know why." Elara's pulse quickened. "What does he look like?" "Older, gray hair, kind eyes. He's always working with wood, building something." Vivian's voice was distant, like she was watching the dream unfold. "And he's sad, so sad, like he lost something he can't get back." Elara pulled out another photo. Robert standing in his workshop, holding a piece of carved wood. One of the few photos she'd found in the house. "Is this him?" Vivian looked at the photo. Her hand trembled as she reached out to touch it. "Yes. Who is he?" "Our father. His name was Robert. He died 3 months ago, but before he did, he found you. He knew you were here. He tried to get you released, but he ran out of time." Tears slid down Vivian's face, silent and steady. "I don't remember him, but I feel like I should. Like there's this empty space where something important used to be." "That's grief," Elara said softly. "Even when we can't remember what we lost, we still feel the shape of it." Vivian wiped her face roughly. "Why can't I remember? The doctors say it's trauma, but they don't know what kind. They don't know what happened to me." "Do you want to know?" Vivian was quiet for a long time. Then, "I'm afraid to." "That's okay. We don't have to figure it out today, or tomorrow, or ever if you don't want to." "But you want to know." It wasn't a question. Vivian was looking at her with surprising clarity. Elara nodded. "I do. Because someone took you. Someone hurt you enough that your mind shut down to protect you, and whoever did that is still out there. You want revenge. I want justice, and I want to make sure they can't hurt anyone else." Vivian considered this. "What if I don't remember? What if it's just gone forever?" "Then we work with what we have. Our father kept journals. He documented everything he found while searching for you. There are leads, names, places. We can start there. If you want, if you're willing to leave here and come with me." Vivian looked around the common room. At the neutral walls, the careful furniture, the other patients moving through their carefully structured days. "This place is safe," she said. "Nothing bad happens here, but nothing good happens either, does it?" Vivian's mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "No, nothing good. I can't promise it'll be easy. I can't promise you'll get your memories back, but I can promise you won't be alone, and I can promise that whatever we find out, we'll face it together." Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood. "I want to see the house." "What house?" "The one in the picture, with the trees and the workshop. I think I've been there before. In my dreams, I'm always trying to get back to a house in the trees. Alara's throat tightened. That's our father's house in Timber Falls. I'm staying there now. Take me there. Are you sure? Vivian met her eyes. No, but I'm tired of being safe. I want to remember who I was, even if it hurts. Getting Vivian released took 3 days of paperwork, psychiatric evaluations, and conversations with doctors who were deeply skeptical about discharging a patient into the care of a sister she didn't remember. But Alara was relentless. She provided documentation. She sat through interviews. She convinced them that family was exactly what Vivian needed. Finally, on the 3rd day, Carol handed her the discharge papers. She's fragile, Carol said. More fragile than she seems. Any stress, any pressure to remember it could cause a breakdown. I understand. Do you, because she's been stable here for 3 years, and you're about to take her into a situation that's completely unknown. If this goes wrong, it won't. You can't promise that. No, Alara admitted. But I can promise I'll take care of her. She's my sister. She's all the family I have left. Carol studied her for a long moment. Then she handed over a bag with Vivian's belongings, a few changes of clothes, some art supplies, nothing personal, because Vivian had arrived with nothing. Good luck, Carol said. You're going to need it. The drive back to Timber Falls was quiet. Vivian sat in the passenger seat, watching the landscape change from city to forest. She didn't ask questions, didn't speak at all for the first hour. Then as they climbed into the mountains, she said, I remember this. Alara glanced at her. The mountains. The feeling, driving through trees, being cold, being scared. Vivian's hands clenched in her lap. Someone brought me this way before, a long time ago, when you disappeared. Maybe. I don't know. It's not a memory, just a feeling. That's okay, feelings are a start. They drove in silence for another hour. The mountains grew taller, the trees denser. By the time they reached Timber Falls, it was late afternoon and the sky was threatening rain. Vivian sat up straighter as they turned onto Hartley Road. I know this place. You've been here before. You spent a summer with Dad when you were 15, right before you disappeared. Vivian stared at the house as it came into view. At the white siding, the porch, the workshop behind it. I was happy here, she said quietly. I don't remember details, but I remember the feeling. I was happy. They got out of the car. Vivian stood in the driveway looking around like she was trying to match the reality to the fragments in her mind. Come on, Alara said. I'll show you inside. But Vivian didn't move toward the house. She moved toward the workshop. In there, she said. I need to see in there. Alara followed her across the yard. The workshop door opened with the same soft creak. Inside, the late afternoon light made everything glow. Vivian walked slowly through the space, ran her fingers along the workbenches, touched the tools, stopped in front of the cradle. He made this for me, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. How did you know? Vivian pulled back the drop cloth, revealing the carved birds. I remember these, Blue Jay, Robin, Chickadee. He taught me their names. We'd sit on the porch in the morning, and he'd point them out. It was the first concrete memory Vivian had shared. Elara felt hope bloom painfully in her chest. What else do you remember? Vivian closed her eyes. The smell of sawdust, coffee in the morning, him teaching me how to use a chisel, being patient even when I messed up. She opened her eyes. And then nothing. It just stops, like someone turned off a light. The summer ended. You went back to Boston. And then I disappeared. Yes. Vivian turned to face her. Someone took me from Boston to Portland. Someone kept me for years because I didn't end up at that hospital until I was 22. That's 7 years missing. 7 years I can't account for. The math was brutal. Elara had done it herself, but hearing Vivian say it made it real in a way that hurt. We'll find out what happened, Elara said. How? Our father's journals. He documented everything, and there's someone in town who knew him well. Her name is Margot. She might have answers. I want to read the journals. Viv, I don't know if that's a good idea. They're detailed. Some of what he wrote. I don't care. They're about me. I have a right to know. She was right. As much as Elara wanted to protect her, Vivian deserved the truth. Okay, Elara said. But not tonight. Tonight you rest. You just left the only place you've known for 3 years. That's enough for one day. Vivian looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion was etched into her face. Fine, but tomorrow I read everything. That night Elara made dinner in their father's kitchen while Vivian explored the house. She could hear her sister moving upstairs, opening doors, walking through rooms. Eventually Vivian came back down. Which room was mine? The one with the paintings on the walls, the watercolors. I painted those. Yes, they're good. They are. Vivian sat at the kitchen table. I don't know how to be a person. In the hospital, everything was scheduled. Someone told me when to eat, when to sleep, what to do. Now I'm here, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You're supposed to be yourself, however that looks. But I don't know who that is. Elara set a plate in front of her. Then we'll figure it out together. They ate in silence. After dinner, Vivian went upstairs to her old room. Elara cleaned up, then sat at the table with the journals spread in front of her. She was looking for specific entries now. Anything about Martin Whitfield or his son Callum. Anything that might explain how Vivian ended up in Portland. She found an entry from 9 years ago that made her stop. The investigator found something. A connection I wasn't looking for. Martin Whitfield owns property in Idaho, near the bus station where Vivian was supposedly spotted 8 months after she disappeared. The investigator thinks it's worth looking into. I'm not sure. Martin is dead now, died last year. Connecting him to Vivian's disappearance feels impossible, but the timing is suspicious. Vivian went missing 4 months after our confrontation, when I told Martin I'd never sell him this land. Could he have been cruel enough to retaliate by taking my daughter? I want to say no, but I've learned that men like Martin are capable of anything when they want something badly enough. Alara read the entry 3 more times. Then she flipped forward, looking for follow-up. 2 months later. The Idaho property was sold 6 years ago. New owners say Martin never lived there, just used it as a rental. No records of who rented it. Another dead end. But it wasn't a dead end. Not really. If Martin had property in Idaho, and Vivian was spotted near that property, and Vivian ended up in Portland, Oregon, the next state over, then there was a trail, faint but real. And if Martin was involved, then his son might be too. Callum Whitfield. Alara pulled out her laptop and opened a search engine. Typed in Callum's name. The results were extensive. Callum was well known in Oregon business circles. Whitfield and Associates was one of the largest property development firms in the state. He'd been featured in local magazines, on business podcasts, at charity events. He looked successful, respectable, clean. But Alara had learned that appearances meant nothing. She dug deeper. Found an article from 5 years ago about Martin Whitfield's death. Tragic accident, claims local businessman. The details were sparse. Martin had fallen down the stairs at his Portland home, died instantly. Callum had found the body. The article mentioned that Martin was survived by his son and a legacy of successful business ventures. No mention of fraud. No mention of Robert Hartley or the men Martin had destroyed. History was written by winners, and Martin had won until he'd fallen down those stairs. Alara kept searching, found property records. Callum owned dozens of parcels throughout Oregon, including several in Timber Falls, and there buried in the records was the Idaho property Martin had owned, sold 9 years ago to a holding company owned by Callum Whitfield. Callum had inherited his father's property, had kept the Idaho parcel for 3 years after Martin died before selling it. Why hold on to a rental property in Idaho unless it was useful? Alara's hands shook as she cross-referenced dates. Vivian disappeared 10 years ago. The Idaho property was sold 9 years ago, 1 year after Vivian vanished. It could be coincidence. But Alara didn't believe in coincidences anymore. She closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen thinking. If Callum was involved in Vivian's disappearance, then he was dangerous, more dangerous than Margot had implied, and Alara had just brought Vivian right to his doorstep. The next morning, Alara woke to find Vivian already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with the journals spread around her. "You said I could read them," Vivian said without looking up. "I did. I just didn't think you'd start at 5 in the morning. I couldn't sleep." Alara made coffee and sat down across from her. "What have you found?" "A lot of pain. He really loved us." "He did, and I don't remember any of it. I read these entries about teaching me carpentry, about us laughing about me painting while he worked, and it's like reading about someone else's life. Give it time. The memories might come back." "What if they don't? What if this is all I get, other people's memories of who I used to be?" Alara didn't have an answer for that. Vivian turned a page, stopped. Her face went pale. "What is it?" Alara asked. This entry, 3 months before I disappeared, he writes about a man coming to the house, a man named Martin Whitfield who wanted to buy the property, and Dad refused. They argued. Vivian looked up. It says Martin threatened him, said Dad would regret the decision. I saw that entry, and 4 months later, I disappeared. The connection was there, obvious, damning. Martin is dead, Alara said. Died 5 years ago, but his son isn't. Vivian tapped the journal. There are entries about Callum, too, continuing his father's work, making offers, pressuring Dad to sell. She looked at Alara. You think they're connected, my disappearance and the property? I don't know, but I want to find out. How? Before Alara could answer, there was a knock at the door. Both sisters went still. Are you expecting anyone? Vivian asked. No. Alara stood and walked to the front window, looked out. A black car was parked in the driveway. Expensive. New. The knock came again, confident, patient. Alara opened the door. A man stood on the porch, mid-40s, well-dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her rent back in Boston, dark hair going gray at the temples, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Hartley, he said. I'm Callum Whitfield. I hope I'm not interrupting. Every instinct Alara had screamed danger. What do you want? She asked. Callum's smile widened slightly. To welcome you to Timber Falls, of course, and to make you an offer you'll want to hear. Behind Alara she heard Vivian stand, heard her sister's sharp intake of breath. Callum's eyes moved past Alara to Vivian. His expression flickered just for a second with something that looked like recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by professional courtesy. I didn't realize you had company, Callum said. Perhaps I should come back another time. What's the offer? Alara asked, blocking his view of Vivian. Callum pulled an envelope from his jacket. $1.5 million for this property. Cash. Close in 30 days. You'd be free to go back to Boston or wherever you'd like with enough money to start any life you want. No, you haven't even looked at the paperwork. I don't need to. This house isn't for sale. Callum's expression hardened slightly. Miss Hartley, I understand this is emotional. Your father just passed. You're attached to his memory. But sentiment doesn't pay bills. This property is worth maybe $800,000 on the open market. I'm offering almost double. And I'm saying no. Perhaps you need time to consider. She said no. Vivian said, stepping into view. Her voice was quiet but steady. She doesn't need time. She needs you to leave. Callum looked at Vivian again. This time the recognition was unmistakable. His face went carefully blank. Have we met? He asked. I don't know, Vivian said. Have we? The air between them was electric, dangerous. Callum turned back to Alara. The offer stands. When you change your mind, and you will call me. He handed her a business card. I'd hate for this to get complicated. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Property disputes can be messy, expensive, time-consuming, especially when titles are unclear. The title is perfectly clear. My father left this property to me. Did he leave it to his daughters? Plural. Callum's eyes flicked to Vivian. Because if there's another heir, things get complicated, legally speaking. Alara felt ice in her veins. He knew. Somehow he knew who Vivian was. Get off my property, Alara said. Callum smiled. Of course, but Miss Hartley, be careful who you trust. This town has a long memory, and not all of it is friendly to the Hartley name. He walked to his car, drove away slowly like he had all the time in the world. Alara closed the door and turned to Vivian. Did you recognize him? Vivian's face was ashen. I don't know. When I looked at him, I felt... She pressed a hand to her stomach, sick, scared, like my body remembers something my mind doesn't. He recognized you. I'm sure of it. How would he know who I am? I've been in a hospital for 3 years with no name. I don't know, but we need to figure it out. Fast. Alara pulled out her phone, called Margot's number, which she'd saved after their first meeting. Margot answered on the second ring. Alara, Callum Whitfield just showed up at the house. Silence. Then, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Margot arrived in 9. She took one look at Vivian and said, You found her. You knew? Alara asked. Robert told me. Showed me pictures from the facility. Margot walked to Vivian, studied her face. You look better than in the photos. Healthier. Who are you? Vivian asked. Someone who loved your father very much, and someone who's going to help you figure out what happened. Margot turned to Alara. What did Callum want? To buy the house, offered $1.5 million. Margot whistled low. He's desperate. That's more than double what this place is worth. He knew who Vivian was, or at least he suspected. That's not possible, unless... Margot stopped. Unless someone at the hospital told him. Did you tell anyone you were looking for your sister? Alara thought back. The phone calls, the facility, Carol. I told the receptionist Vivian's name, and I had to provide documentation to get her released. Then Callum has people watching, probably paying someone at Bridgewater to report any inquiries about Jane Doe's. Margot sat down heavily. This is worse than I thought. Why would he care about Vivian? Alara asked. Because if Vivian can remember what happened to her, she can connect Callum to her disappearance. And if she can do that, everything he's built falls apart. Vivian stood up abruptly. I need air. She walked out the back door onto the deck. Alara moved to follow, but Margot stopped her. Give her a minute. This is a lot. What do you know that you're not telling me? Alara asked. Margot was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled a USB drive from her pocket. Your father gave me this before he died. Made me promise to only give it to you if Vivian was safe. If both of you were together. What's on it? Everything Robert couldn't prove. Everything he suspected but couldn't confirm. About Martin, about Callum, about what they did to your family. Alara took the drive. Why didn't you give this to me before? Because it's dangerous. The kind of information people kill to keep quiet. Robert died protecting it. I wasn't going to hand it over until I was sure you could handle what you'd find. And now Callum knows Vivian is here. which means you're both in danger anyway. You might as well have all the facts. Alara plugged the USB into her laptop. The drive contained folders, dozens of them, labeled by year, by name, by topic. She opened the one labeled Callum Whitfield, Suspicions. Inside were photographs, grainy, taken from a distance. Callum entering buildings, leaving properties, meeting with people. And there in a folder dated 9 years ago was a photograph that made Alara's blood run cold. Callum standing outside the Idaho property his father had owned, and beside him a teenage girl with dark hair. The photo was blurry, taken from far away, but Alara would recognize her sister anywhere. Vivian, age 17, very much alive, very much not missing, which meant for at least 2 years after Vivian disappeared, Callum had known where she was, had possibly been the one keeping her there. Alara's hands shook as she clicked through more photos, more sightings. Callum at the Idaho property, always alone, never with Vivian visible again. Robert took these, she asked, hired an investigator to take them, but by the time he got enough evidence to go to the police, the property was sold. Vivian was gone, no proof she'd ever been there. This is proof, Alara said, pointing at the photograph. It's a blurry picture of a girl who might be Vivian. No prosecutor would touch it. Robert tried. Believe me. Alara kept clicking through files, found transcripts of phone calls, recordings Robert had made of conversations with investigators, and there in a file marked Final Evidence was a video. She clicked play. The video was dark grainy, clearly taken on a hidden camera. It showed the interior of what looked like a warehouse. Concrete floors, metal shelves, and in the corner a figure sitting on a cot. The camera zoomed in slightly. It was Vivian, unmistakably, older than in the other photos, maybe 19 or 20, alive but clearly not free. The timestamp on the video was 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Callum's father Martin had died. The video cut to black. Then another clip started. This one showed Callum entering the warehouse, walking to Vivian, talking to her though there was no audio. Then Callum left. The camera stayed on Vivian for another minute before cutting out. Alara stared at the screen, not breathing. Robert had this for 5 years, she said. Why didn't he go to the police? He did, Margot said quietly. The video was ruled inadmissible. Obtained illegally, no chain of custody, no way to verify the date or location. Callum's lawyers tore it apart. By the time the legal battle was over, Vivian was gone from that location. Robert spent 2 more years searching before finding her at Bridgewater. And then he died. And then he died. Alara looked out the window. Vivian was still on the deck, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the trees. She needs to see this, Alara said. Are you sure? Once she knows there's no going back. She deserves to know who did this to her. Knowing and remembering are different things. This might not bring her memories back. But it's the truth, and she has a right to it. Margot nodded slowly. Then I'll stay while you show her. in case it's too much. Alara walked outside. Vivian turned when she heard the door. I need to show you something, Alara said, and it's going to be hard, but I need you to see it. Vivian's face was calm, too calm. It's about him, isn't it, Callum? Yes. Then show me. They went inside. Alara pulled up the video. Vivian watched in silence. Her expression didn't change even when she saw herself on screen. When it ended, she said, "Play it again." Alara did. Vivian watched 3 more times. Then she stood and walked to the window. "I was there," she said. "I don't remember it, but I was there." "For at least 2 years," Alara said. "Maybe longer. And he kept me there. Callum, he kept me prisoner." "We think so, but we can't prove it. Not legally." Vivian turned around. Her eyes were dry but blazing. "Then we find proof, real proof, the kind that puts him in prison." "Viv, that's not. We should go to the police with what we have and tell them that you have illegally obtained video and some blurry photos. They'll dismiss it just like they did when Dad tried." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we make him confess." Margot stepped forward. "That's dangerous. Callum isn't stupid. He won't just admit to kidnapping." "No, but he's worried. I saw it in his face when he looked at me. He's afraid I'll remember, afraid I'll talk." Vivian's voice was cold, determined. "We use that. We make him think I'm starting to remember, make him scared enough to slip up." "And if he doesn't slip up?" Alara asked. "If he decides the safer option is to make sure you never remember anything?" "Then we'll have proof of that too." The plan was insane, reckless, dangerous. But looking at her sister's face, at the determination there, the rage, the need for justice, Alara understood. Vivian had spent 10 years lost, 3 years erased, 7 years stolen. She deserved a chance to take some of that back. "Okay," Alara said. "We'll do it your way, but carefully, and with backup." Margot sighed. "This is a terrible idea." "Do you have a better one?" Vivian asked. "No, which is why I'm going to help you. But we do this smart. We plan every step, and at the first sign of real danger, we pull out." "Agreed." Both sisters nodded. "Then let's figure out how to catch a predator," Margot said. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning. Margot knew the town knew Callum's patterns, knew who could be trusted. She called Isaiah Webb, the retired investigator who'd worked for Robert. He arrived an hour later, a lean man in his 60s with sharp eyes and a handshake like iron. "Robert told me about both of you," Isaiah said, looking at the sisters. "Said if anything happened to him, I should watch out for you." "We need your help," Alara said. "Figured as much when Margot called. What's the play?" They laid it out. Vivian would reach out to Callum, request a meeting, say she was starting to remember things and needed to talk. Isaiah would wire Vivian, record everything, get Callum on tape admitting to his crimes. "He won't confess that easily," Isaiah warned. "He will if he thinks I'm a threat," Vivian said. "If he thinks my memories are coming back, he'll want to know how much I know. He'll want to control the narrative." or he'll want to silence you permanently. That's why you'll be listening. First sign of real danger, you come in. Isaiah looked at Margot. You're okay with this? No, but I'm more afraid of what happens if we do nothing. Then we move fast, before Callum has time to plan. Isaiah pulled out equipment from his bag. This is a wire, voice activated, records to a secure cloud. Even if something happens to the device, we'll have the recording. He showed Vivian how to wear it, how to position herself to get the clearest audio. Remember, he said, get him talking. Don't accuse, just ask questions. Act confused, scared. Make him think you're not a threat. People confess when they think they're in control. Vivian nodded. When do we do this? Tomorrow, Alara said. Give him time to wonder. Make him sweat. And what do we do until then? Margot stood. We prepare. We make sure every detail is perfect, because we're only going to get one shot at this. That night, after Margot and Isaiah left, Alara and Vivian sat on the porch in the dark. Are you scared? Alara asked. Terrified, but also I feel alive. For the first time since I woke up in that hospital, I feel like I have a purpose. Your purpose shouldn't be revenge. It's not revenge. It's justice. There's a difference. They sat in silence for a while. An owl called from the trees. The wind moved through the pines like breath. Alara, Vivian said, thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. For coming here. For believing I was alive when everyone else said I was dead. Alara's throat tightened. You're my sister. I should have looked harder, should have never stopped looking. You were 18. You'd just lost Mom. You were drowning. That's not an excuse. It's not an accusation either. It's just what happened. Vivian turned to look at her. But you're here now. That's what matters. I'm here now, Alara agreed. And I'm not going anywhere. They sat together until the cold drove them inside, until exhaustion pulled them toward sleep. Tomorrow they would set a trap, would confront the man who had stolen Vivian's life. But tonight, for just a few hours, they were simply sisters, together, home. And that Alara thought as she climbed the stairs to bed was worth fighting for. Vivian made the call at 9 the next morning, standing in the kitchen with her hands steady and her voice calm despite the wire taped beneath her shirt. Isaiah sat at the table with headphones on, monitoring the signal. Margot stood by the window, watching the road. Alara paced, unable to sit still. Mr. Whitfield, Vivian said when Callum answered. This is Vivian Hartley. We met yesterday at my father's house. There was a pause on the other end. Then Callum's voice, smooth and controlled. Miss Hartley, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I need to talk to you, privately, about something I'm starting to remember. Another pause, longer this time. What kind of something? Not over the phone. Can we meet? When? Today. This afternoon. There's a coffee shop in town, Brennan's Brew. 2:00. I'll be there. The line went dead. Vivian lowered the phone. Her hands were shaking now. He's coming. You don't have to do this, Alara said. We can still back out. Go to the police with what we have. And watch them do nothing, no. This ends today. Isaiah checked the recording equipment. Signal strong. I'll be in the back booth. Margot will be outside in the car. Elara, you stay here. Absolutely not, I'm coming. You'll make her nervous, and if Callum sees you, he'll know it's a setup. Isaiah's right, Vivian said quietly. I need to do this alone, but knowing you're close, that helps. Elara wanted to argue, wanted to insist on being there, but she saw the determination in her sister's face and recognized it. It was the same stubbornness she saw in the mirror every day. Fine, but you take this. She pressed her phone into Vivian's hand. Speed dial 1 is my number. Anything feels wrong, you call immediately. I will. They spent the hours before the meeting preparing. Isaiah went over questioning techniques, how to keep Callum talking, how to guide the conversation without seeming like she was interrogating him. Margot made sandwiches that no one ate. Elara read through her father's journals again, looking for anything they might have missed. At 1:30, Vivian changed clothes, put on jeans and a sweater that hid the wire. Let Isaiah check the connection one more time. Remember, he said, stay calm. Let him do most of the talking. People confess when they think they're helping, not when they're being accused. I understand. And if at any point you feel unsafe, I leave. I know. Margot drove Vivian into town. Elara watched from the porch as the car disappeared down the road, then went back inside and tried not to watch the clock. She failed. At 1:45, her phone rang. Margot, we're here. Vivian's going in. I'm parked across the street with a view of the front door. And Isaiah, already inside, back corner booth. He's got eyes on the whole room. Call me the second it's over. I will. Elara ended the call and sat at the kitchen table staring at her father's journals without seeing them. Every minute felt like an hour. Every sound made her jump. At 2:00 exactly, Margot called again. Callum just arrived. He's going inside. Elara pressed the phone to her ear so hard it hurt. Stay on the line. I want to hear everything. I can't. Isaiah's the one with the audio feed. But I'll call you if anything happens. The line went dead. Elara sat in the silent kitchen and waited. Inside Brennan's brew, Vivian sat at a corner table with her back to the wall watching Callum approach. He looked different in daylight, less polished, more dangerous. His smile was the same, but his eyes were calculating. Thank you for meeting me, Vivian said as he sat down. Of course, though I have to admit I'm curious what this is about. He signaled the waitress ordered coffee. You said you were starting to remember things. Some things, not everything. The doctors said it might come back slowly in pieces. What kind of pieces? Vivian wrapped her hands around her own coffee cup. Places, faces, feelings more than actual memories. She looked up at him. I keep dreaming about a warehouse, concrete floors, cold. I'm alone, but I know someone's coming, someone I'm afraid of. Callum's expression didn't change. That sounds distressing. It is, especially since I don't know if it's a real memory or just my mind making things up. She paused. But yesterday when I saw you at the house, I felt that same fear, like my body recognized you even if my mind didn't. I'm sorry if I frightened you. That certainly wasn't my intention. I don't think you frightened me then. I think you frightened me before, a long time ago." The air between them shifted. Callum set down his coffee cup carefully. "What exactly are you suggesting, Miss Hartley?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm trying to understand what happened to me. I lost 10 years of my life. Someone took those years from me, and I want to know who. And you think I had something to do with it?" "Did you?" Callum laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This is absurd. I'm a businessman, not a kidnapper." "Then why did my father have photographs of you at a property in Idaho? Photographs with me in them taken 2 years after I disappeared." His face went very still. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. My father documented everything, every lead, every suspicion. He knew you were involved. He just couldn't prove it." Vivian leaned forward. "But I can, because I was there. I just need to remember." "Memory is unreliable, especially traumatic memory. Any lawyer would tell you that. I'm not building a court case. I'm trying to understand my own life. By accusing me of crimes I didn't commit, I haven't accused you of anything. I've asked a question. If you have nothing to hide, why are you so defensive?" In the back booth, Isaiah adjusted his headphones. The conversation was going exactly as they'd hoped. Callum was rattled, defensive, saying more than he should. Callum studied Vivian for a long moment. "Your father was a troubled man, paranoid. After what my father did to him, yes, I know about the fraud case. Know that my father was responsible. Robert never recovered. He saw conspiracies everywhere. Were they conspiracies if they were true? Nothing was true. Robert Hartley was a victim of his own imagination." "Then explain the photographs." "I can't explain photographs I've never seen. For all I know, your father fabricated them or misinterpreted what he saw." "So you were never at the Idaho property?" "My father owned many properties. I may have visited some of them. That doesn't mean I kidnapped anyone." "I didn't say kidnapped." "Interesting, that's where your mind went." Callum's jaw tightened. "This conversation is over." "Is it because I have more questions? Like, how does a 15-year-old girl disappear in Boston and end up in Portland 7 years later with no memory of how she got there? Who has the resources to hide someone for that long? Who benefits from keeping that person silent?" "I don't know, but it wasn't me." "Then who?" "Perhaps you should ask yourself why you can't remember. Maybe your mind is protecting you from something or someone. Maybe. Or maybe someone made sure I couldn't remember. Trauma does that. So does certain kinds of drugs. Did you know that prolonged use of benzodiazepines can cause amnesia? And guess what was in my system when I was admitted to the hospital?" Callum stood abruptly. "I came here as a courtesy, but I won't sit here and be accused." "I'm not accusing, I'm asking. There's a difference." "Not to my lawyers, there isn't. If you continue this harassment, I'll have no choice but to take legal action." "Harassment? I'm trying to find out what happened to me." "What happened to you is tragic. But it has nothing to do with me. And if you persist in spreading these baseless accusations, you'll find yourself in a position you don't want to be in. Is that a threat? It's a warning. This town has a long memory, Miss Hartley. Your father made a lot of enemies with his paranoid accusations. I'd hate to see you make the same mistakes. He walked out. Vivian sat very still, her heart pounding, until Isaiah slid into the seat Callum had vacated. You did good, he said quietly. Really good. We got him talking more than I expected. But he didn't confess. Not directly, but he confirmed he knew about the Idaho property, confirmed he knew about your father's suspicions, and his threat at the end. That's evidence of consciousness of guilt. It's not enough. It's a start. Let's get you out of here. Outside, Margot was waiting in the car. Vivian climbed into the back seat and let out a shaky breath. How do you feel? Margot asked. Like I just poked a hornet's nest. You did. Question is, what's he going to do about it? They drove back to the house in silence. Ilara was waiting on the porch. She pulled Vivian into a hug the moment she got out of the car. Are you okay? I'm fine. He's rattled. That's good. Or dangerous. Isaiah pulled out his recording equipment. Let's listen to what we got. They gathered in the kitchen and played back the conversation, listening to it again, hearing Callum's voice crack when Vivian mentioned the photographs, the defensive edge when she asked about the Idaho property. It was clear he was hiding something. The question is, Isaiah said, can we use this? Alone, no. But combined with the photographs and video your father had, it establishes a pattern. It shows Callum has knowledge he shouldn't have unless he was involved. So we take this to the police? Ilara asked. Not yet. We need more. One more piece that ties everything together. Like what? Isaiah was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, the warehouse, the one in the video. If we can find it, if we can prove Callum owns it or has access to it, that's our smoking gun. My father spent years looking for that location, Margot said. Never found it. Because he was looking in Idaho. But Vivian was found in Portland. What if the warehouse is here? What if Callum moved her after his father died? Vivian closed her eyes, trying to pull up the fragments of memory. Concrete floors, metal shelves. I could hear traffic sometimes, close enough that it had to be a city. Portland's a big city, Ilara said. How do we narrow it down? We look at Callum's property holdings, see what matches the description. Isaiah pulled out his laptop. I still have access to the property databases. Give me an hour. He worked while the others waited. Margot made coffee. Ilara paced. Vivian sat at the table staring at nothing, trying to remember. Finally, Isaiah said, Found something. Callum owns a property in northwest Portland, industrial district, listed as a storage facility. But there's no business registered at the address, no tenants. He's been paying taxes on it for 5 years since his father died, but it's empty. That's it, Vivian said suddenly. Show me the address. Isaiah turned the laptop toward her. You recognize it? No, but something about the location feels right. Can we go there? Absolutely not, Ilara said immediately. If that's where you were held, walking in there is... Necessary. I need to see it. Need to know if it's the place from my dreams. Then we all go, Margot said. And we go armed with cameras, phones, everything we need to document what we find. And if Callum's there, Alara asked. He won't be. Not in the middle of the day. He'll be at his office maintaining his respectable businessman facade. Isaiah closed the laptop. But we go carefully. We don't touch anything. We photograph, we document, and we leave. They left an hour later, all 4 of them in Isaiah's truck. The drive to Portland took nearly 4 hours. By the time they reached the industrial district, the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows between the warehouses. The address led them to a sprawling complex of metal buildings surrounded by a chain-link fence. The gate was locked, but the fence was climbable. There, Vivian said, pointing to a building in the back. That one. How do you know? Alara asked. I just do. They parked down the street and approached on foot. Isaiah had a camera. Margot had a crowbar for the lock. Alara stayed close to Vivian, watching her sister's face for signs of distress. The lock on the gate was old. Margot had it open in under a minute. They slipped inside, moving quickly to the building Vivian had indicated. The door was locked too, but this time with a newer deadbolt. He's definitely hiding something, Isaiah muttered, working on the lock. This is serious security for an abandoned warehouse. It took him 5 minutes. Then the door swung open and they stepped inside. The interior was exactly as the video had shown. Concrete floors, metal shelving along the walls, and in the corner a cot with restraints still attached to the frame. Vivian stopped breathing. This is it, she whispered. This is where I was. Alara took her hand. You're safe now. He can't hurt you here. But Vivian pulled away, walking deeper into the space. Her steps were slow, deliberate, like she was moving through a dream. She stopped in front of the cot, touched the metal frame, and suddenly, violently, the memories came flooding back. She gasped, stumbled, would have fallen if Alara hadn't caught her. Vivian, talk to me. I remember. Vivian's voice was barely audible. I remember everything. They sat on the floor of the warehouse while Vivian told them what she'd remembered. Isaiah recorded every word. I came back to Boston after the summer with Dad, Vivian began. I was supposed to visit again at Christmas. But then Mom died and everything fell apart. Alara was drowning in grief and I didn't know how to help. So I started taking the bus to Timber Falls on weekends, just to get away, just to feel like I had somewhere to go. She paused, gathering herself. One Friday after school I was walking to the bus station. A car pulled up, black sedan. The driver said he was a friend of Dad's. Said Dad had sent him to pick me up, that it would be faster than the bus. Alara's hand tightened on Vivian's. I believed him. I got in the car, and he drove me not to Timber Falls, but to Idaho, to a house in the middle of nowhere, Martin Whitfield's house. Martin himself was there, Isaiah asked. Yes, he said he was protecting me, that Dad was dangerous, unstable, that he'd hurt me if I went back. I tried to leave, but the doors were locked, the windows barred. He kept me there for 2 years. Vivian's voice was flat now, distant, like she was reading from a script. He didn't hurt me, not physically, but he kept me isolated. No phone, no internet, no contact with anyone. He said he was waiting for the right time to rehabilitate me, to make me understand that my father was a criminal and couldn't be trusted. Psychological imprisonment, Margot said softly. When I was 17, Martin died, fell down the stairs, but I didn't know that immediately. I just knew that one day he didn't come back, and instead Callum came. She looked up at them, her eyes hollow. Callum told me his father had died, told me I was free to go. But then he said if I told anyone what had happened, he'd make sure Dad went to prison. Said he had evidence that Dad had been embezzling money, that he could destroy him. He was lying, Alara said. I know that now. But I was 17, and I'd been imprisoned for 2 years, and I believed him. So I stayed quiet, and he moved me here, to Portland, to this warehouse. Why? Isaiah asked. Why not just let you go? Because I knew too much. I could connect Martin to my disappearance. And Callum was building his empire on money Martin had stolen. If I talked, everything would collapse. Vivian stood, walked to the cot, looked down at the restraints. He kept me here for another 5 years. Brought food, water, clothes. Never hurt me, but never let me go. And slowly I started to break. Started to forget who I was. Started to believe the things he told me, that no one was looking for me, that my family had moved on, that I was better off here where I couldn't cause trouble. How did you get out? Margot asked. I don't know. One day 3 years ago I woke up outside a hospital. No memory of how I got there. The doctors said someone had left me at the emergency room entrance. Callum, Isaiah said. He got scared. You were becoming too unstable, too much of a liability. So he dumped you somewhere you'd be taken care of, but couldn't identify him. But he gave me enough benzodiazepines first to make sure I wouldn't remember anything. The doctors found it in my system. Thought I'd been self-medicating. Vivian turned to face them, and there were tears streaming down her face now. 7 years? He stole 7 years of my life, and I let him because I was too scared and too broken to fight back. Alara crossed the warehouse and pulled her sister into her arms. You survived. That's what matters. You survived, and now we're going to make sure he pays for what he did. Isaiah was already photographing everything. The cot, the restraints, the lock on the door. This is evidence, real physical evidence, combined with Vivian's testimony and your father's documentation. We have a case. Will it be enough? Margot asked. It'll have to be, because we're taking this to the police tonight. They left the warehouse exactly as they'd found it and drove straight to the Portland Police Department. It was after 8 when they arrived, but Isaiah insisted on speaking to a detective immediately. Detective Sarah Chen met them in an interrogation room. She listened to Vivian's story without interrupting, taking notes, her expression carefully neutral. When Vivian finished, Detective Chen said, "That's quite an accusation. Do you have any evidence to support it?" Isaiah laid out everything. The photographs, the video, the recordings from the coffee shop, the warehouse location, Vivian's testimony. Detective Chen examined it all carefully. The warehouse is compelling. If it's owned by Callum Whitfield and we can place Miss Hartley there, that's a strong connection. But the rest, the photographs, are circumstantial. The video was obtained illegally, and the recording from today doesn't contain a confession. "So you won't investigate?" Alara demanded. "I didn't say that. I'm saying this is complicated. Callum Whitfield is a prominent businessman. We can't just arrest him based on accusations. We need more." "What more do you need?" Vivian asked. "I'm telling you what happened, and I believe you. But a defense attorney will tear apart your testimony. 7 years of captivity with no one noticing, no escape attempts, no calls for help. They'll say you were there willingly, or that your memory is unreliable after everything you've been through. So he just gets away with it. No, we investigate. We build a case. We do this right so it actually sticks." Detective Chen closed her notebook. "I'll need you to give a formal statement. All of it from the beginning. It'll take hours. Are you prepared for that?" Vivian nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." They spent the next 6 hours at the police station. Vivian gave her statement. Isaiah provided copies of all the documentation. Alara and Margot filled in details about Robert's investigation. By the time they left, it was nearly 3 in the morning. They drove back to Timber Falls in exhausted silence. "What happens now?" Alara asked as they pulled up to the house. "We wait," Isaiah said. "The police investigate. They'll search the warehouse, interview Callum, follow the evidence. It could take weeks, maybe months. And until then you stay safe, because Callum's going to know you talked, and that makes you dangerous to him." Callum found out about the police investigation within 48 hours. His lawyers called. The police wanted to question him about allegations of kidnapping and false imprisonment. He sat in his office looking out at the Portland skyline and realized he'd underestimated the Hartley sisters. He'd thought Vivian was too broken to be a threat, thought Alara would take his offer and leave. He'd been wrong on both counts. The question now was how to contain the damage. His lawyers were confident. "They have no real evidence," they assured him. "Circumstantial at best. We can fight this." But Callum knew better. He'd spent 5 years covering his tracks, but tracks could be uncovered. And if the police started digging deep enough, asking the right questions, talking to the right people, they might find something he'd missed. He needed to act. Not rashly, that's what they'd expect, but strategically. He had resources, connections, lawyers who knew how to make problems disappear, and he had leverage. That afternoon he drove to Timber Falls, not to the Hartley house that would be too obvious, but to Margot's coffee shop. She looked up when he walked in, her expression hardening. "We're closed," she said. "I can see you're open." "Not for you." Callum sat at the counter anyway. "I want to make things right. With the Hartley sisters, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding? That's what you're calling 7 years of imprisonment." "I'm calling it a tragic situation that I had nothing to do with. But I understand they're upset. They need someone to blame. I get it. Get out of my shop. I'm prepared to make a generous offer. $2 million. They drop the accusations I buy the property, everyone moves on. You think you can buy your way out of this? I think I can offer them a way forward that doesn't involve years of legal battles they'll probably lose. Because let's be honest, Margot, what do they actually have? A traumatized woman's memories and some circumstantial evidence. No prosecutor will touch this. Detective Chen seems interested. Detective Chen is doing her job. But when my lawyers get involved, when they start poking holes in Vivian's story, when they point out that she has no physical evidence, no witnesses, no proof of anything, this falls apart. Margot leaned across the counter. You're scared. I can see it. You're scared because for the first time in your life, you might actually face consequences. I'm being practical. The offer stands, $2 million, and this all goes away. Get out. Callum stood. Tell them to think about it, because this is the last generous offer they're going to get. Next time my lawyers won't be so nice. He left, and Margot immediately called Alara. He was just here, offering money to make this go away. How much? $2 million. Alara laughed bitterly. He really is scared. What are you going to do? Nothing. We wait for the police to do their job, and we don't take his blood money. But 3 days later, Detective Chen called with bad news. The warehouse has been cleaned, completely sanitized. No DNA, no fingerprints. Nothing that places Vivian there. But the cot, the restraints, gone. The whole building is empty. Someone cleaned it out between when you were there and when we got the warrant. Callum, he knew we'd reported it. Probably. But we can't prove that either. Chen sighed. I'm sorry. Without physical evidence from the warehouse, this case gets a lot harder. What about Vivian's testimony? Still valuable, but it's her word against his, and his lawyers are already building a defense. They're saying Vivian's memories are false, implanted by suggestion or trauma, that she's confused or being manipulated. That's insane. That's effective. Look, I'm not giving up. We're still investigating. But I wanted you to know this isn't going to be quick or easy. After the call, Alara found Vivian in the workshop sitting by the cradle their father had made. They cleaned the warehouse, Alara said. Vivian didn't look up. I know. I heard you on the phone. I'm sorry. Don't be. I knew this wouldn't be easy. She ran her fingers along the carved birds. Dad spent 10 years trying to prove what Callum did, and he couldn't. What made me think I could do it in a week? Because you have something Dad didn't. You have your testimony. You were there. And apparently that's not enough. They sat in silence for a while. The workshop smelled like sawdust and linseed oil, like their father. What do we do now? Vivian asked finally. We keep fighting. We find another way. What if there isn't one? What if he just wins? He doesn't get to win. Not after what he did to you, to Dad, to this family. Vivian stood. Then we need to think differently. Stop trying to prove what happened in the past. Start focusing on what he's doing now. What do you mean? He's desperate. Making offers, cleaning out warehouses, sending lawyers after us. People who have nothing to hide don't act like that. So we make him more desperate. Make him think I'm remembering even more. Make him scared enough to make a mistake. Viv, we tried that. It didn't work. We tried it carefully, safely, with rules and backup plans. Vivian's eyes were hard. I'm saying we stop being careful. That's too dangerous. Living is dangerous. I spent 7 years in captivity being careful, being quiet, being safe. Where did it get me? She shook her head. No more. If the system won't give us justice, we'll force Callum to give it to us himself. Before Alara could respond, her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. She answered. Hello, Miss Hartley. This is attorney Bradley Morrison from Morrison Whitfield and Associates. I represent Callum Whitfield. Alara's stomach dropped. What do you want? My client has asked me to deliver a message. The offer of $2 million has been withdrawn. However, if you and your sister drop all accusations and sign a non-disclosure agreement, Mr. Whitfield is prepared to offer $1 million and the deed to the Timber Falls property free and clear. And if we don't, then my client will be forced to pursue defamation charges and will be very thorough in demonstrating that your sister's accusations are false, malicious, and damaging to Mr. Whitfield's reputation and business. You can't intimidate us. This isn't intimidation, Miss Hartley. It's a reality check. Your sister has no evidence. The police investigation has already stalled. You're facing years of litigation you can't afford against lawyers who do this for a living. Take the offer. Move on with your lives. Go to hell. Alara hung up. Vivian was watching her. What did they want? To scare us, to make us give up. Are we going to? Alara thought about their father, about the journals full of dead ends and false hope, about 10 years of searching that had ended with him dying alone, his daughter still lost. She thought about the cradle in the workshop, the letters that had been returned, the house built with hope that his family would come back. She thought about everything Callum Whitfield had taken from them. No, Alara said. We're not giving up. We're going to end this, whatever it takes, even if it means breaking the rules, especially if it means breaking the rules. For the first time since they'd reunited, Vivian smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who'd finally decided to stop being a victim and start being a fighter. Good, Vivian said, because I have a plan. The plan was simple, reckless, and possibly illegal, but it was also the only thing they hadn't tried. We break into his office, Vivian said. Find the real evidence, the documentation of the Idaho property, the warehouse purchase financial records showing how he paid to keep me hidden. It has to be somewhere. That's burglary, Margot said, her voice heavy with concern, but lacking the immediate dismissal Alara expected. You could go to prison. I've already been in prison for 7 years. At least this time it would be for something I actually did. Isaiah was more thoughtful. It would work. If we could get in, get the files, get out without being caught. But Callum's not stupid. His office will have security, cameras, alarms, maybe even guards. Can you get past them? Alara asked. Probably. But there's a difference between probably and definitely. I'll take probably. Even if we get caught, even if this destroys any chance of a legal case. The legal case is already destroyed. Chen as much as said so. This is our last option. Margot leaned forward. If we do this, and I'm not saying we should, we need to understand the risks. Callum has resources, political connections. If he catches us, he'll make sure we pay for it. Which is why we don't get caught, Vivian said. They argued for another hour. The risks, the potential consequences, the slim chance of success. But underneath it all was a shared understanding they'd run out of legal options. This was a Hail Mary, and sometimes Hail Marys worked. Isaiah scouted Callum's office building over the next 2 days, mapped out the security, identified the weak points, studied the guard rotations. Sunday night, he said finally. Minimal security. 1 guard on the main floor, cameras on every entrance, but they're on a loop. I can hack it, give us a 30-minute window. That's not much time, Margot said. It's enough, if we know exactly what we're looking for. Financial records, Vivian said. Property deeds. Anything connecting Callum to the Idaho house or the Portland warehouse. Anything showing payments to facilities or people who helped keep me hidden. He won't keep records like that in a physical office, Alara said. He'll have them digital encrypted. Then we take his computer. That's theft on top of burglary. I'm aware. Sunday night arrived with a cold rain that turned the Portland streets slick and empty. They parked 3 blocks from Callum's building just after midnight. Isaiah had a laptop lockpicks and a portable hard drive. Alara had a camera to document everything they found. Vivian and Margot were lookouts. 30 minutes, Isaiah reminded them. The second the loop resets, we're on camera. We need to be gone by then. They approached the building from the back. Isaiah worked on the service entrance lock while Alara kept watch. It took him 4 minutes to get them inside. The building was dark and silent. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly green glow. They took the stairs to the 7th floor where Callum's office was located. The office door was locked with a keypad. Isaiah attached a device that cycled through combinations. 3 minutes. Then they were inside. Callum's office was exactly what Alara expected. Expensive furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city awards and photos on the walls. Computers here, Isaiah said, moving to the desk. I'll start copying files. You look for anything physical. Alara and Vivian searched drawers, filing cabinets, anywhere documents might be hidden. Most of it was ordinary business contracts, correspondence meeting notes. Then Vivian found a locked drawer in the credenza. Here, she said. Isaiah picked the lock in under a minute. Inside were folders, lots of them. Vivian pulled them out, started reading. Her face went pale. What is it? Alara asked. Vivian held up a folder. Medical records. For Jane Doe admitted to Bridgewater Psychiatric Center. They're my records. Why would Callum have my medical records? Alara grabbed another folder. This one contained financial statements, payments made to various facilities and individuals, thousands of dollars a month for years. He was paying people, Alara said, paying them to keep quiet, to not ask questions. There's more. Vivian pulled out a file labeled Insurance Policy. Inside were documents that made Alara's blood run cold. Notarized statements from people claiming they'd seen Vivian living freely in Portland. Receipts for apartment rentals in her name. bank statements showing regular deposits and withdrawals. He was creating a false trail, Alara said, making it look like you were living a normal life. So if anyone ever investigated your disappearance, they'd find evidence that you were fine, that you'd just chosen to disappear. That's why the police couldn't find me. Because officially I wasn't missing. I was just a troubled young woman who'd left home. Vivian's hands shook. He thought of everything. Almost everything, Isaiah said from the computer. He kept digital copies of everything, including emails with his father discussing the situation with the Hartley girl. This is it. This is the evidence we need. How long until you have it all? 10 minutes, maybe less. Alara photographed every document, every receipt, every forged statement. They were so focused on the evidence that they almost didn't hear the elevator. Margot's voice came through their phones, urgent and terrified. "Someone's coming. You need to get out now." Isaiah grabbed the portable hard drive. "Still downloading. Need 2 more minutes." "We don't have 2 minutes," Alara hissed. The elevator dinged. Footsteps in the hallway. "Go," Isaiah said. "I'll finish here and meet you downstairs." "We're not leaving you." "You have to. If Callum catches all of us, he can destroy everything. At least this way the evidence gets out." Alara grabbed Vivian's arm. "Come on." They slipped out of the office through a side door that led to the emergency stairs. Behind them they heard Callum's voice. "I know someone's here. The system alerted me. Come out now and we can discuss this like adults." Alara and Vivian ran down the stairs as quietly as they could. 7 flights. 6. 5. Behind them an alarm started blaring. "He knows," Vivian gasped. "He knows we were in his office." They hit the ground floor and ran for the exit. Outside, Margot had the car running. They dove in and Margot floored its tires, squealing on wet pavement. "Where's Isaiah?" Margot demanded. "Still inside. He'll meet us." But Isaiah didn't meet them. They drove to the rendezvous point, a parking garage 2 miles away, and waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Alara's phone rang. It was Isaiah. "I got it all," he said, his voice tight. "Everything. But Callum caught me leaving. He's threatening to call the police unless I hand over the hard drive." "Don't do it. Get out of there." "He's blocking the exit. And he's not alone. He's got 2 security guards with him." "Then go out another way." "There isn't one. Alara, you need to take what you have and go. Get it to Detective Chen. Make sure this doesn't disappear." "Isaiah, tell Vivian I'm sorry. Tell her it was worth it." The line went dead. Alara tried calling back. No answer. "What's happening?" Vivian asked. "Callum has him. Has the hard drive." Vivian's face crumpled. "This is my fault. I pushed for this." "No, this is Callum's fault. All of it." Alara looked at the photographs on her phone, the documents they'd captured. "But we still have evidence. We still have what we need." "Not without Isaiah's testimony about where it came from." "Then we'll find another way." Margot drove them back to Timber Falls in silence. When they arrived at the house, the police were waiting. Detective Chen stood on the porch with 2 uniformed officers. "Miss Hartley," she said, "I need you and your sister to come with me. You're being charged with breaking and entering, burglary, and theft. Callum called you. His lawyers did. They have security footage of you entering the building. And they have a witness, your friend Isaiah, who's already given a statement implicating you both. That's impossible. Isaiah would never. He did, because Mr. Whitfield offered him immunity in exchange for cooperation. I'm sorry, but I have to take you in. Alara and Vivian looked at each other. Then without a word they held out their wrists for the handcuffs. They'd tried to fight the system, and the system had won. But as Detective Chen led them to the police car, Alara felt her phone buzz in her pocket. A message from an unknown number. She pulled it out carefully. Read the text. Downloaded everything to cloud backup before they caught me. Password is your father's birthday. Make it count. Isaiah. Alara almost smiled. They weren't beaten yet. Not by a long shot. The courthouse steps were slick with March rain when Alara and Vivian emerged into the gray Portland afternoon. Behind them the building loomed like a monument to patience. 12 weeks of testimony, cross-examination, and waiting had finally come to an end. Detective Chen was waiting by her car, an umbrella already open. Congratulations, she said, and for the first time since they'd met she was smiling. Guilty on all counts. Kidnapping, false imprisonment, obstruction of justice. Callum Whitfield is looking at 30 years minimum. Vivian leaned against Alara, suddenly exhausted. It's really over. It's over, Chen confirmed. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. The evidence was overwhelming once we got into the cloud backup. Isaiah's documentation combined with your testimony and the financial records, Callum's lawyers couldn't explain any of it away. Where is Isaiah? Alara asked. Waiting in the courthouse cafeteria. Wanted to give you two some space. Chen handed Alara the umbrella. You should go find him. He's been asking about you every day for 3 months. They found Isaiah exactly where Chen said he'd be, nursing a cup of coffee and staring out at the rain. When he saw them, he stood so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. I heard, he said. Guilty. Thanks to you, Vivian said. If you hadn't backed up those files. If I'd been smarter, I wouldn't have gotten caught in the first place. You gave Callum exactly what he wanted. Made him think he'd won. And then you made sure he lost everything. Alara pulled him into a hug. Thank you doesn't even begin to cover it. They sat together for a while, the three of them, plus Margot, who'd been in the courtroom gallery every single day, and talked about what came next. The criminal case was over. The civil case recovering damages for what Callum and his father had done would take years. But for the first time they could breathe. What will you do? Margot asked the sisters. Now that it's finished. Alara and Vivian exchanged a look. We're staying, Alara said. In Timber Falls. The house, the workshop, we're keeping it. All of it. All of it. Dad wanted us to have it. Wanted us to build something there. Vivian's voice was steady now, stronger than it had been 3 months ago. We're going to turn the workshop into a community center. Teach woodworking to kids who need somewhere to go. Call it the Robert Hartley Memorial Workshop. Margot's eyes glistened. He would have liked that. I know. That's why we're doing it. The burglary charges against Alara and Vivian had been dropped after the cloud backup proved what they'd found in Callum's office. The documents were ruled admissible as evidence of a greater crime. Isaiah was cleared of any wrongdoing after he testified that he'd cooperated with Callum under duress, with the intention of preserving evidence rather than destroying it. Callum's lawyers tried everything. They attacked Vivian's memory, her credibility, her mental health. They argued that the cloud backup was inadmissible, that the break-in tainted all subsequent evidence. They painted Robert as a paranoid obsessive and Alara as a gold digger. None of it stuck, because the emails between Callum and Martin were impossible to explain away. Detailed, meticulous records of every decision they'd made about Vivian, where to hold her, how to keep her quiet, what to do when Robert started getting close. The emails went back a decade, and the financial records were even worse. Payments to a private security firm to watch the Idaho property. Payments to a nurse who had administered the benzodiazepines. Payments to forge apartment leases and create the illusion that Vivian was living freely in Portland. Callum had kept records of everything because he'd been trained by a father who documented every transaction. Martin had run his business like a ledger, receipts for everything, even crimes. It was his own meticulous nature that destroyed him. On the witness stand, Vivian had been extraordinary. She spoke clearly, calmly, without embellishment. She didn't cry, didn't rage, didn't beg for sympathy. She simply told the truth about the car that picked her up after school, about the house in Idaho, about the warehouse in Portland, about the years of isolation and psychological torture that had erased her identity. When the defense attorney tried to rattle her, suggesting her memories were fabricated or implanted by Alara, Vivian had looked at him with steady eyes and said, "I spent 3 years in a hospital because I couldn't remember who I was. Now I remember everything, and the man who did this to me is sitting right there." The jury had been visibly moved. Callum himself never took the stand. His lawyers had advised against it, knowing that the emails and financial records spoke louder than any denial he could offer. He sat through the trial in expensive suits, his expression carefully neutral, watching his empire collapse one document at a time. When the verdict was read, he didn't react, just stared straight ahead, jaw tight, as if he'd already accepted what was coming. 30 years. No possibility of parole. The Whitfield estate was frozen pending the civil case. The development deal in Timber Falls collapsed without Callum's backing. The Portland developer pulled out. The town that had been on the verge of transformation returned to its quiet, steady self. Some people in Timber Falls were disappointed. The resort would have brought jobs, money, attention. But most of them had known Robert Hartley, had bought furniture from his workshop, had seen him fix fences and repair porches without asking for payment, had watched him search for his daughter with a dedication that bordered on obsession. When word spread about what the Hartley sisters planned to do with the workshop, donations started arriving. Tools, wood, money in plain envelopes slipped under the door. The town that had been too small to save Robert Hartley turned out to be just the right size to honor his memory. 6 months after the verdict, the Robert Hartley Memorial Workshop opened its doors. Elara had designed the renovation herself, her first project as an independent architect. She'd kept the bones of her father's workspace intact. The workbenches were still there, the tools still hanging in their precise arrangements. But she'd opened up the back wall, added windows that flooded the space with light, built a teaching area with smaller benches for younger hands. Vivienne had painted the sign for the front door, hand-lettered the way their father's journals had been handwritten. Below the name she'd added a line, "Where broken things are made whole again." On opening day, 15 students showed up, teenagers mostly, some from Timber Falls, some from neighboring towns. Kids who needed somewhere to go after school, something to do with their hands, someone to pay attention to them. Elara taught them the basics: how to measure, how to cut, how to sand with the grain instead of against it. She heard her father's voice in her own instructions and understood finally what he'd been trying to give her all along. Not just skills, but patience. Not just craftsmanship, but care. Vivienne ran the creative side. She'd found her way back to painting in the months after the trial, filling canvases with color and light that felt nothing like the dark years she'd endured. She taught the students to see beauty in imperfection, to find art in ordinary materials, to trust their instincts, even when their hands were clumsy. Margot handled the business side with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd been running a small-town coffee shop for 30 years. She kept the books ordered, supplies, made sure the students were fed. She also kept a framed photograph of Robert on the wall near the entrance, the same photograph that had been hanging in the house when Elara first arrived. Robert with Vivienne on his shoulders, both of them laughing. Isaiah came by on Saturdays, taught a small group of older students the finer points of woodworking dovetail joints, inlays, the kind of detail work that took decades to master. He never talked about his past, about the years he'd spent as an investigator, about the night he'd been caught in Callum's office. He just showed up, rolled up his sleeves, and worked. Robert would have liked this, he said one afternoon, watching a teenager carefully plane a piece of oak. He always said the best thing about building something was knowing it would outlast you. "Is that what we're doing?" Elara asked. "Building something that outlasts us." "You're building something that outlasts what happened to you. That's harder and more important." And some evenings after the students left and the workshop was quiet, Elara and Vivienne would sit on the back porch of the house and watch the sun set behind the mountains. The light would pour through the pines and paint everything in shades of amber and gold, and for a few minutes the world felt like it was holding its breath. They didn't talk much during those times. They didn't need to. The silence between them had become something comfortable, something earned. Not the silence of strangers, but the silence of two people who had walked through fire together and come out the other side. One evening, about a year after the trial, Vivienne brought something to the porch. The cradle Robert had carved, the one with the birds along the rim, and the words, "For Vivienne, my lost star," carved into the headboard. "I finished it," she said. Elara looked at the cradle. Vivienne had completed the carving. Her father had started adding more birds along the sides. A hawk, an owl, a hummingbird. Each one perfect, each one alive in the wood. "It's beautiful," Elara said. "I'm giving it to the workshop for the students to see. Vivian ran her fingers along the rim. Not because it's mine, but because it's proof that someone can be lost and still be thought about, still be loved. Alara nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Elle, Vivian said, using the nickname she'd started using again, the one from their childhood that had somehow survived everything. Yeah. Do you think Dad knows about the workshop, about us being here? Alara looked out at the trees, at the mountains, at the workshop glowing warm in the fading light. I think he always knew we'd find our way back, she said. He built this place for us, left us the clues, set up the 30-day rule so I couldn't run away like I always do. She paused. He knew me better than I knew myself. He knew both of us. Even me and I barely remember him. You're remembering more every day. I am. Yesterday I remembered the sound of his laugh, deep kind of rumbling like it started in his chest. Vivian smiled, and I remembered him singing while he worked, badly, but with his whole heart. That sounds like him. They sat together watching the last light fade from the sky. The first stars appeared faint but growing brighter. He couldn't give us our childhood, Vivian said quietly. He couldn't undo what Martin and Callum did. He couldn't come back to us or save me or fix any of the things that went wrong. No, he couldn't. But he gave us the truth. And he gave us each other, and this place. Vivian looked at the house, at the workshop, at the town beyond the trees. I think that's enough. It is enough. Vivian stood and picked up the cradle. I'm going to go put this in the workshop. Want to come? Alara shook her head. In a minute. I want to sit here a little longer. Vivian walked across the yard, the cradle in her arms, moving through the last light of day with a steadiness that still surprised Alara sometimes. Not the tentative steps of the woman she'd found in the psychiatric facility a year ago, but the sure, grounded walk of someone who finally knew where she belonged. Alara watched her go, then turned back to the mountains. She thought about her father, about the life he'd lived here alone, working with his hands, waiting for his daughters, about the journals full of hope and heartbreak, about the letters that had been returned, the furniture that had never been finished, the love that had never been delivered. She thought about her mother, who had been wrong about Robert, but not wrong to be afraid, about the way fear could look like cruelty when it was really just self-preservation. She thought about Callum Whitfield, who was spending his first year of a 30-year sentence in a concrete cell, not so different from the one he'd kept Vivian in. She thought about justice, and whether it was the same thing as peace. And she thought about this house, this workshop, this town. The inheritance she'd almost refused. The 30 days that had turned into forever. Alara reached into her pocket and pulled out the note she'd found on her first day, the one pinned to the photograph. Alara Vivian is alive. Find her before they find you. Dad. She'd found Vivian. She'd found the truth. She'd found her way home. And sitting on the porch of her father's house, watching the stars come out over the Oregon mountains, Alara Hartley finally understood what Robert had been trying to tell her all along, that families don't break just because they bend. That love doesn't end just because it goes undelivered. That broken things, broken people, broken families, broken trust can be made whole again. Not perfectly, not the way they were before, but in a new way, stronger for having been broken, more beautiful for the scars. She folded the note carefully and put it back in her pocket. Then she stood and walked across the yard to the workshop where her sister was waiting, where the light was warm, where the tools hung ready on the walls. Ready to build, ready to begin again,